Before we begin today's episode, quick note, there's going to be an event coming up if you're listening to this in August that you can still attend. It is the Alcor Strategic Board meeting, which is open to members. It is going to be on the 25th and 26th of August. That's a Friday and a Saturday. And we'll be discussing more about it during the episode, but you can look down in the show notes where we will put links to it and to the Eventbrite page where you can go and get tickets for it and find out other information like where to stay and how to get there. So look forward to that. And now back to the show. Today we're joined by James Arrowood. James started working with Alcor in 2015 as outside general counsel and has helped Alcor successfully navigate through various complex legal and related business matters. James served for several years on the board of directors for a major local nonprofit down there in Arizona and as the public relations chair. He has served in various other public relations press information positions over the decades. James has appeared in numerous times as an expert on emerging technologies, both in print articles and television news appearances, including segments on TV, all the major networks. He taught the Arizona State Bar course on emerging technologies and is a published author on medical legal issues. James has his Juris Doctorate from the University of Notre Dame, and several undergraduate degrees from the University of California, Irvine, as well as numerous professional certifications and bar admissions. Now, that's the official background, but Daniel and I had a chance to meet James and sit with him not too long ago. What's he like? In a word, energy. James comes across as a guy that wants to get things done and get them done today, if not yesterday. He has plans and is going to execute on them. So, without further ado, we bring you the great James Arrowood.
Oh, man. All right.
I told you, I was going to use the great, just...
Flattery will get you everywhere, sir.
There you go. We're starting off on the right foot.
Sure.
So, James, you are the new co-CEO of Alcor. So before we get into everything else, can you explain, alongside Marji Klima, can you explain to us what that means, first of all? What's your role, what's Marji's role, and what does that mean?
Okay. So my background in my career, 20 plus years in law and some other business things, because I have several businesses, including a medical clinic, by the way. So I'm an owner of a medical clinic here in Scottsdale, which is relevant, obviously. But the co-CEO role had to do with the notion that I'd worked with this board over the years. I had worked with a lot of companies on emerging technologies and what we call inflection points, which is when you go from the origin story that you started in your garage that we hear so often, right? Everybody likes to have the garage startup story. Different people's garages are bigger than my whole house, for instance, and talk about Bill Gates. But in any event, so Alcor's kind of reached this point, even though it's been around 50 years, it went from this membership organization, a lot of really smart people and scientists and kind of a clubby feel, to where it's now, it has 1,500 members plus, and it has 200 plus patients and stasis, and it has animals. And so it's really kind of reached this epoch of a transitional point. Now, when emerging technology companies transition, that's often a point where good things can happen or bad things can happen, and it depends on management and that sort of thing. And the board, I think, knew some of my experience and had seen some of my judgment, hopefully, with some matters. And the problem was when there was an opening at Alcor for executive role, I don't know how to pay the light bill at Alcor, and I hadn't been in a role at Alcor doing that sort of thing. Marji had been, and Marji had really worked her way up and kind of put a lot of hard work into understanding those dynamics, meaning the operational components, the day-to-day stuff at Alcor, right? But it turns out that Alcor is not just a service business. I know a lot of the members think of it as providing kind of a service, but that service is actually in service to Alcor's 501c3 mission, which is nonprofit scientific research and education. And sometimes that can get lost in the process. And so what that means, though, practically speaking, operationally, is that there's this component that you have to maintain every day. You're providing a team that goes out and recovers people, recovers your members, but you also have to initiate research, and you have to be pursuing the science at the same time. And that's hard for any one person to do, right? And so I think the board thought, well, why don't we come in and have Marji, we know, can kind of run the day to day. James is kind of a big picture, like you mentioned. I'm a get it done now guy, and there were these things that frankly had probably been too much for just one person to kind of do both, right? To service the service side of the business, but also have the energy to go after the new initiatives or scientific research that would make things better in the process. It's a small nonprofit. When I started at Alcor, I think we had 13 employees, and that's a hard task for 13 employees at a nonprofit. And frankly, the new model, I think, has really done well for Alcor in terms of making things happen quickly. And so we'll talk about that, obviously, but definitely there's been, I think, what people would objectively say is progress because of that bifurcation of the roles. There's somebody minding the store while there's somebody going out and really aggressively going after new initiatives.
What what do you think? So you like you described it. It's not just a service organization. It's an educational and a research organization. What do you think now that you've been the CEO for not too long, but for a good time? What do you think would be some of the misconceptions that members have about what it's like to be in your position as the CEO of an organization like this?
Great question. What do I think it's some of the misperceptions perhaps, or maybe things that members don't know but ought to know? And first of all, let me take some responsibility just in my position at Alcor, that Alcor, I think, again, being short-staffed, it's been hard to do, and in fairness to prior administrations, as it were, but Alcor could do a lot better job of educating just its membership of what is involved in what we do, okay? And that is something that really took me a little bit by surprise. I anticipated coming into the role that there would be things I would, be introduced to that I didn't know, but what I didn't really have a good grasp on was how difficult this is. I mean, we are doing something that very few people in the world know how to do effectively, quickly, all the things that go into that, the logistics of it. You're sending teams out within a few hours notice, and they need to do a good job. And also we need to get data. It's not just recovering a patient. We're a scientific research organization. So you have to do the research component too, which means you have to compile data as you're doing an extremely time sensitive service, right? And picking people up. You also have to do what your core mission is, which is compile data and then research and apply it to research and move the ball forward in terms of the science. And so all of those components together, and I use the example of some of the for-profits. So everybody, I think, in the Cryonics community, once you've been around a little bit, you've heard stories about prior for-profit organizations, for instance, years ago, that failed. And they failed kind of spectacularly because they jumped into the pool and they thought, okay, well, we can go do this. And maybe they did it once or twice, or maybe they figured it out. But to long-term consistently do this and do a good job, the complexity of it with regards to even the financials, which when I started, I went out and aggressively met members. And some members who listen to this might have met me. I went on the road for weeks and weeks and weeks, all throughout the East Coast. I visited 13 states, 2 countries, went to Texas, obviously, been all over the place. And I have found out that members don't have a good grasp on the financials. They don't understand the cost modeling of this. And so those are educational components that Alcor, when we're working on it, we have a lot on our plate. And the first thing to do is go get members. So that's number one. But we are going to be educating our membership, I think, in a much more broad way to help them understand the things that they can't or don't know in terms of how this actually goes. It is incredibly difficult to do this well, incredibly. And that's why for-profits have a problem.
And how would you say, like you said, it's incredibly difficult to do what you're doing well. How would you say, just as background, many of the listeners may know, we've had a chance to speak to Max Moore and Patrick Harris on previous episodes. How would you differentiate your approach, your style, your thought process on and what you bring to the job versus your predecessors?
So what I bring to the table that's maybe different than some of my predecessors is that I have personally had to run my own businesses, whether it was a law firm or a medical clinic. And I don't know that in their backgrounds they had that background where they were running a business where in order to eat every month, you had to make sure you were making money and you had to be profitable and you had to have these financial modeling systems and everything else. Now Patrick had an MBA, very smart guy, uh, but Alcor is more akin to kind of having a small business in the sense that there's a lot of things going on and there's one or two people towards the top of that model that have to direct multiple shows at once, right? You have to engage with your staff and employees and manage that component. So having employees at the same time, you have members. You have thousands of members, uh, and then you have to have a research lab, right? And so for in my particular circumstance, like my clinic, for instance, has been very successful by all measurables. And there's certain models that apply that all I'm doing is kind of taking them and applying them to Alcor. And that is, and it's just what tools do you have in your toolbox? And obviously I happen to have legal tools, but I also have business tools. And I have business tools that are you have to do it this month, otherwise your mortgage doesn't get paid. Well, that's a different kind of, you know, pressure and a different kind of motivation than perhaps my predecessors had. And I don't want to take anything away from them. I don't know all their backgrounds, but I'm just guessing that kind of multiple businesses that I've had and taking, but smaller businesses. Again, we have a staff of, or had a staff of 13. We now have, I think, 18. Uh, but those kinds of things, I think, help effectuate change quickly. Now, does that translate up if we had a multi-billion-dollar company to run? Well, maybe Patrick in an MBA in that circumstance might do a better job. So I don't want to take anything away from them. It's just my tools in my toolbox applied to this circumstance and seem to be applying very well to what needed to happen at this time.
So would you call yourself scrappier in a positive sense than your predecessors were?
I wouldn't compare myself to anybody at this point. I just do what I do, and I make a sincere effort to address. So I have a mental checklist, and this is a checklist I've applied to any emerging technology company I've advised as an attorney, for instance. So take it even outside of my own businesses. But if I've been hired as an attorney to come in and kind of almost like a management consultant, where they might come in and look at it and find in what I call inflection points, or what I also call triage. So any business, even a highly successful business, you can walk into it and triage it a bit and say, hey, here's a little thing where you can, reduce your packaging size and save 2 cents per package and extrapolated times a billion packages. That's real money. I think there's a song quote that everything counts in large amounts, right? And so if you have that kind of mental checklist attitude, and it's just something that I've been trained to do and I do quickly, you go and evaluate circumstances and you evaluate people, and then you look at what I call highest and best use cases. That's really important. So what are people's skill sets? What's their highest and best use under the circumstances, and how does that play into what the strategic goals of the organization are, right? And so you have to go in and make that analysis and make judgments quickly, and then you have to look at numbers. You have to say, okay, where are we overspending? Where can we bring some of this, in-house, or where should we outsource it? And you have to do those analysis quickly when you're at inflection points in a business. And this is a nonprofit, so it's particularly relevant because and this is something I found out the members don't understand or know. Again, we need to educate people, so we'll take responsibility for that. But, when it comes to Alcor financially, a major component of our income, as it were, is donations. And there's this perception that Alcor gets a ton of a ton of its operational money for application to, day-to-day operations and staff from the life insurance payouts, for instance, on members. That's not the case. And in fact, in many cases, we'll run a case and we might take a loss on the actual overall deployment, even though, because people hear a big number of $200,000, say for whole body or what have you, and they just assume that that covers it. And they don't understand that right off the top, operationally, greater than 50% goes to the long-term care trust, which operationally I can't touch. I can't use that to buy a paperclip to use on a case, right? And so now you say, okay, well, that's still a lot of money. Well, M22 is incredibly expensive. And much of the equipment that we use is custom equipment. So what happens is people are so used to the notion of cryonics and what we do, and we've done it a long time and we've done it well, but they look at it and just kind of assume that, oh, well, they must have a model in terms of gear and equipment and things that is, for lack of a better term, when you go to a big company, for instance, you have volume and you have volume pricing. Well, Alcor doesn't have that. Everything we use is custom developed, and we're trying to be state of the art constantly. So even like M22, you can't go to Home Depot and buy a barrel of M22. It doesn't exist anywhere else. So we have to get it, as an experimental chemical and use it in that application. Our equipment, again, you may be able to buy components of equipment from I don't know where, but you may be able to buy some components of stuff. But the reality is this stuff is custom built. And anytime you're using custom equipment, custom chemicals, people with specialized knowledge, guess what? You have to pay more. It's part of the business model. And so those costs get eaten up, and we are heavily reliant on generosity of our members. And thank goodness for those donations, because they make up a substantial portion of our operational expenses. Or income, I should say, not expense. Income.
It's just as a side note, you mentioned that the price of M22, is that because it's expensive to manufacture it, or is that from like a licensing, to have the right to use it kind of thing?
Well, when it comes to expensiveness, for instance, of the cryoperfusate that we use, right, M22, it's not that the provider's making such a profit on it, because I don't think they are. And I've looked at this, it's one of the first things when I come in and I'll look at something in a business, I'm looking at the costs of goods, right? The cost of fungible items, things that you use up and you can't get a return on. So while it's very expensive, it's expensive because it's experimental, meaning there is no volume that's produced. It's produced for Alcor. So when you have something that's a sole source, sole use case, and again, I've seen this in emerging technology companies, and a lot of people on the outside don't understand what we call the burn rate of why things like UAVs, for instance, when unmanned aerial vehicles were first coming out in the wide context, the propeller blades were extremely expensive. And people were like, well, they're just propeller blades. It's like, yeah, but they're made just for this item to test it, and they're this big, and they have to be machined, and there's a whole process to it. Now, of course, now they're cheap. You can get them anywhere, right? But that is the dynamic with Alcor, where much of what we have, because Cryonics is not a volume enterprise in any way, shape, or form, we've got to pay that premium, that technology premium, innovation premium, and it's nobody's fault. It's just the cost of the components to it. There's very unique ice blocker chemicals in there, and those are extremely expensive because they're not used elsewhere.
So getting back to the matter of, because I know a lot of people who we are connected to, Daniel and I, members and others in the community have these kinds of questions. Getting back to the question of CEOs and Alcor CEOs. How do you assuage the concerns of members that they're primarily interested or worried about the stability of Alcor over time, and they see a new CEO, and that we know it's Max and then Patrick and then you, and they worry. They feel like, okay, new CEO, something scary about a new CEO. There's too much change happening, etc. It feels risky. Something feels off. Is there anything you can say to help relax that concern, or to remind people that sometimes there is this kind of churn and new blood and all this kind of thing?
When it comes to changes of leadership, for instance, I know that people see that and sometimes see kind of how quickly some of those developments occur, and they get concerned and they think, oh gosh, this maybe is something I should be worried about. What I have found with Alcor, and I'm also a member, right? And I have, we've talked a little bit, I have some health things that make my membership of more urgent concern perhaps than most. But the point of it is that I I was their attorney, okay, and I'm I I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I'm probably not the dumbest guy in the room either. And I wouldn't have stepped into a position if this were, in such a bad state that it was something that was something to be overly concerned about. In fact, what I think I can say, and of course I have to be cautious because everybody's looking for something, but uh, Alcor, I legitimately believe, is the best in the world at what it does. The science is phenomenal, I think. I'm not a scientist at MIT or anything, but I have been incredibly impressed with certain core components at Alcor. That was why I accepted the role, and so that's really good news, because there are a lot of things in a business, including management, that can change, and the business can do great because changes also bring fresh perspectives, new eyes, and new approaches, right? And that's what I'm trying to bring to Alcor. But if you don't have your core science or your core product, which in this case Alcor is a nonprofit, but really the service and the science and the research, if you don't have that, it doesn't matter how good your management is, or it doesn't matter how bad they are. It's not going to be successful. Alcor's been around for 50 plus years now, and it's because some very smart people have created this kind of wrap around Alcor that makes Alcor, frankly, a very, I think, secure long-term organization. We have all of these things in place that ensure that, I think, and I'm you know yeah, I get it. I get people hear about change, but change happens for a lot of reasons. And it's not always the things that people assume it is, right? And people's business is their business, but I would just caution people. I know in the Cryonics community, one of the things I've learned too is there's a lot of talking. There's a lot of rumors. There's a lot of people that conjecture online. In fact, I try not to even engage in any of it really, because I have a mission. I have a job to do, and I'm focused on that job. And what I call noise, the lack of clarity, seek clarity. And what's clear in the world is that high performance organizations, high performance teams, yeah, sometimes you need to change perspectives. It happens. What you should judge it on, what you should judge Alcor about and look at in terms of leadership and changes, is the things that concern members, and are those things being addressed by whatever leadership is in place. That's what you should look at. And I can at least confidently say that I know I'm very focused, like you said. I'm an intense, I don't know the word you used, but energetic. But I think another word might be intense. I'm an intense person in terms of let's address those things, and that's getting done. I think that's demonstrably getting done. Some of you may have heard of some of the recent cases we've had, and some of the really good results we've had. And there's a bunch of exciting new stuff coming up. Some of which I think there's rumors about stuff, but I think a lot of people don't exactly know what's going on.
Hopefully, we'll clear up some of those in
Yeah,
this conversation as we move forward.
sure. Yeah, but listen, I didn't hang my hat on a sinking ship. I'm not. That would be a dumb thing to do. I had a pretty lucrative legal career, and I took a chance with Alcor, but I took a very educated and calculated chance with Alcor for good reasons.
And just a quick clarification for
Sure.
your legal career. Are you able to serve as legal counsel for Alcor simultaneously as your role as co-CEO?
So as part of my role at Alcor as co-CEO, I am also what they call general counsel, which means it's interesting. I was actually it's interesting because my hat changes a little bit. General counsels end up becoming the clients of outside counsel. So I used to be the outside counsel. Now I'm the one talking to outside counsel, and so it's been a weird juxtaposition for me because I'm so used to being outside counsel. So that has been a little bit of an adjustment for me. But yes, I'm able to handle kind of the larger strategic legal things. Now, Alcor, again, an emerging technology company has legal issues, and it doesn't mean they're bad things. A lot of people just hear legal and assume it's a bad thing. There can be good things, and we have implemented some very good things, I think, in the legal arena for Alcor, and those are good things for the membership as a whole. And I heard we could go off on this, but I heard from some members back east, and they were kind of concerned about, for instance, our intellectual property holdings and how we protect those. And Alcor, again, has been, as an emerging entity, kind of this, we want to be, I think it's, is it Linux? That's like the open source code where everybody can use it or something. And a lot of people have really good intentions, and a lot of our members have really good intentions as scientists, and they're kind of agrarian and want this to all be out there. Well, you can do that, but you can do it in a smart legal way to still protect yourself. Because what's been happening is there's been kind of this I don't know, leakage of intellectual property or what have you, and there have been, for instance, some foreign country actors who are trying to themselves shoehorn off some technology or intellectual property and then patent it so then they can sell it for huge amounts of money. Well, Alcor's a nonprofit. We're not looking to make a bunch of money on it, but we want to prevent other people from preventing us from using our own stuff, right? So that's a good application of legal resources to protect that sort of thing. And then guess what? If we want to license it for $1, we can license it for $1. We can still stay true to that sort of agrarian notion, but we can do it in an intelligent way. And so those are the kinds of tools and thinking that Alcor, again, at an inflection point, probably needed to apply, and the board saw that. It's just changing cultural dynamics. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it may not have been an issue. And so leadership at that time, it wasn't something they needed to address urgently. But, now it is. We're seeing it.
And so you're mentioning that aspect of the sort of organizational culture that when you came in, you realized needed to be updated. Is there anything else when you joined and as your tenure there that you've realized needs to change and that you've helped to begin that change of the kind of organizational culture of Alcor?
Okay, so one of the things when you come into any group, it could be the family unit, it could be a company, it could be anything. Any organized group of people that are going towards a goal, a mission, that have a mission, you check morale, right? So you asked, were there organizational components that needed to change at Alcor when I stepped in? I think the general, if I had to sum it up, which I'm terrible at doing, obviously, I'm not very brief, but if I had to sum things up, look, I look at it like if Alcor is the best in the world, which I really believe they are, they're the best in the world by a large margin for what they do. Start to act like it. Stop having what I call this poverty mindset where, yeah, you're a nonprofit. Yeah, you have to be very responsible in your spending and do things the right way. Absolutely, 100%. But on the flip side, you're the world's best at something. How many people can wake up every day and say that we are in the act of being the world's best, unequivocally at something? So start to act like it. Start to have a little bit of swagger. Start to say, that intensity and energy, the energy word. Let's show up with the energy and let's make it even better, right? Because if you're a world-class Olympic athlete, you don't stop practicing every day. Right? You put work in every single day to maintain that lead, to be the best. And I call it like if Alcor is the Harvard at what they do, right? In terms of institutionally, it's the Harvard at what they do. Let's act like it. Let's carry that little bit of pride to say that we are walking into these doors every day to be the best in the world at something, and let's make it better every day. And so that is the summation of what you're talking about. And I'm not saying that my predecessors did or didn't think that way. I don't know. All I know is that's what I want within that organization if I'm going to lead that organization. And then let's go after it. Let's go after it. make it our goal that every member gets the best cryopreservation possible under the circumstances. Now, we can't always be in control of those circumstances, right? And that's the tough thing about this job. I mean, we care. We deeply care. We feel it, you know. But okay, let's do an analysis and see how we did. And even if we did the absolute best job possible, how can we go better? How do we do one better next time, right? Maybe we can't, but always have that in your mindset, because again, state of the art today is not state of the art tomorrow, right? So let's be seeking the next best thing, always in our head, and that's in service to our membership. That's in service to us individually. If each one of us are members, right? Because we're not dead yet. So if I can come up with something better tonight that applies tomorrow, and I drop dead tomorrow, well, that's just that tiny bit better tomorrow.
Yeah, please do. You know, the
I'm
more of
on,
those,
man.
yeah,
100%. Like, I am about it, you know, and so I don't know if it's that inertia. Maybe inertia is a good word. Maybe I'm just a catalyst for change. And by the way, leadership changes. There may come a day where my style and approach isn't where Alcor needs to be, for the long haul, for the next round. That's part of it. It's okay. I get it. That's life. But I want what's best for the members and what's best for the organization, of which I am one of the members. So there you go.
And this is just an off-the-wall question that occurred to me, but you're saying that so Alcor is the best at what they do. Is there anything? Is there any particular aspect of it where you think one of the other organizations is they're doing that really well, and I wish we could do that as well as they are doing that thing? That's some piece of it.
Well, look, anytime you have other organizations that are entering the space, okay, some people might call that competition. Competition's not always a bad thing. You're competing for similar resources in this space, in that there's a limited amount of people who know about cryonics and, for instance, would donate for research related to cryonics. So yeah, there is a little sense of maybe competition, but again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I can recognize, and here's something that's important, I think, when you're looking at leaders of any organization, and that is, are they able and willing to recognize goodness in their competition, right? And recognize it and reflect on it and say, how can we be better? And I will say that with Alcor, I think that the wrap, what I call the wrap at Alcor, could be much better. And I don't blame Alcor that the wrap's not great, and here's why. Alcor is understaffed, in the sense that we have, was 13 people, we now have, I think, 18 people. There's a lot to this job to do it well, like I mentioned to you. And the wrap in a company is the stuff that often gets overlooked when you're like an emerging technology, because you tend to have a lot of really smart, focused people who focus on what's important, the science and the technology and the act of getting it done, right? That's number one. It should be. But then what they tend to forget about are things like the website. Okay? Alcor's website needs work. It's not a secret. Every member's talked to me about it. I know it. The thing is I'm aware of that problem. We have a limited budget for things like that. And I'm working on that too. I'm working to increase the budget for the wrap. But in the meantime, I want to ensure that the core services and research at Alcor are the best and continue to be the best and continue to improve. So, I've been in the job about 8 months, along with Marji, and we are making sure that the core components of Alcor are the best in the world, and doing our diligence to be that. We have to get resources for the wrap, right? If I'm going to hire an outside company to, for instance, help with the website. So you asked about some of the other cryonics organizations. Yeah, I mean, look, I think tomorrow Biostasis, Emil, their website's sexy. I like it. That's fantastic. The flow through on it and everything is great. And I've told Emil this. I've told Emil with his some of his kind of marketing, I would call them marketing efforts. I mean, he's in a different position, because I think they have kind of this for-profit, nonprofit component. We don't. Nonprofit organizations typically don't do marketing, at least small ones. Now you see like the American Heart Association or American Cancer Association, they'll hire big PR firms and everything, right? But when you're small and still growing, that's a hard spend to make. And members will even say that. Members will say, well, gosh, I'm not sure I want to spend money on X. Okay? Like the wrap, the dressing nice component. But we need to, because why, in Alcor in particular, even as opposed to our other organizations, Alcor is kind of front and center. Like if you talk about cryonics, Alcor, they call it the branding of Kleenex, right? Well, most facial tissue isn't Kleenex. It's not Kleenex. But if you talk about facial tissues, people say, oh, you mean Kleenex. Well, when you talk about cryonics, oh, you mean Alcor. And so we are the front face of cryonics. It's just how it is. And so guess what? That wrap becomes really important, not just for us, but for all of the other organizations. And could we do a better job? Yes. And our other organizations like Emil's, yeah, they're doing a better job on the wrap.
And so when you took the position and you started working there, was there anything that was kind of the opposite where you thought, oh God, this is going to be difficult. I'm going to have to deal with this situation, this personnel thing or this organizational thing or this, and you came in and actually it was fine. It was better than you expected, something that was working better than you had predicted it was going to be working when you took the job.
I think in terms of things that were working better at Alcor, the core technology and science, some of that stuff was, I mean, again, not all this stuff is public, and I understand some people wish it all were, but there's very good reasons that some of it's not, but no, the core things that I look for in terms of the potential for success of an emerging technology of any kind, pick one, driverless vehicles, unmanned aerial vehicles, whatever, is the core product good? And Alcor stuff was better than I thought in some ways. Now the contrapositive of that is there too. So one of the issues, for instance, that members talk a lot about is funding, insurance and insurance products and things like that. I am shocked at how difficult it is with some of these. Like I have ideas about how insurance products could be applied in a better way for all, whether it's Alcor or other cryonics organizations. I am shocked that insurance companies are not just lining up to set up a product that's good for cryonicists and good for them. I mean, that's just money on the table. And yet, because I think some of the wrap that, the PR, public relations, you mentioned I've done some PR roles and things, and I have, and I think I have a better grasp of that than a lot of people. And that was something that really, I didn't understand the depth of pushback from, large credible organizations where they were like, well, we don't want to be associated with cryonics. I'm like, it's why not? You're associated with all kinds of other stuff that's way far out there, worse than anything we're even trying to do. We're trying to do good things. We're trying to advance the science. And yet there is this just cultural pushback. So I flipped it on you a little bit, but that is something that I'm still stunned right now at some of the reluctance to engage by some of those organizations. I'm working on it though,
Yep. We're working on it too. Hopefully we can all, our combined efforts can make a dent on that.
So, James, you've been kind of spending a good portion of your tenure as CEO flying out to meet members and donors. You flew out here and got to have dinner with us, and we learned a lot about you. Why did you choose to do this in this way? Why not just email a few kind of VIP members and ask for their opinions and call it a day? Why are you making this huge tour?
Okay, you asked about leadership and maybe how I view it, and this is again not a knock on anybody else's approach, but my personal approach and how I've been trained is you lead from the front. If you're in battle, you don't lead from behind where shots are being fired. You go to the front and figure it out, see it for yourself, hope you survive, and then go to the back and clean it up, right? Well, my mentor, one of my professional mentors and a very good friend, his motto was always that you go to the scene. You go to the scene. And whether it's the scene of the accident or it's the scene of the crime or it's the scene of the business, And so in my legal career, when I would engage with new clients, one of the things I made a point of doing was going to their factories. Now you say, well, why would, and I would volunteer my time. I wasn't billing my hourly rate to go there. I would, if, I would go there. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to get a sense of where are their potential failure points? Where are there potential liabilities on the factory floor? Like, am I seeing that they don't take good care of the safety measures? Am I seeing these things? Because as an attorney, I want to have that in the back of my head to say, okay, this is something I need to counsel my client about, right? Well, Alcor is unique. I mean, we're a membership organization in that way. And so where is the scene? The scene is our members. And by the way, I want to throw this out there because you asked actually one of the things I thought was better in coming to Alcor that I wasn't aware of. Like I've known and been aware some of the public members of Alcor that are higher profile, for instance. And that Alcor had some pretty cool people associated with it that are public. What I didn't know was the depth of Alcor's membership in terms of on these trips now that I've made, Max and Dan, these people, they're world class. And it blows me away because I'm going to some of these institutions, I'm meeting with people that have like literally changed the world. But they're people that I can't say who they are. I can't talk about who they are. And I have been stunned at the quality of our membership. And it has nothing to do with whether you're rich or poor. There's very wealthy people and there's very average income people that are members. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the raw IQ and skill sets of these people. And they're across the board. You have the arts, you have musicians, you have artists, you have game designers, right? You have computer programmers, you have medical doctors, and you have world-class preeminent scientists. You have quiet people who are just living their daily lives, but they're deeply thoughtful people. And they're smart. Now that's tough as a leader because smart people challenge you, right? Like I remember I went to one of my early meetings and it was uncomfortable. I went to a group meeting where I was peppered with aggressive questioning by very smart people for about 2.5 hours. Okay, and they weren't holding punches. They were like, hey, we've seen this, why aren't this, that, and I'm like, I'm on the fly. Now, thankfully, my litigation experience, with my training as a lawyer, you're in the courtroom and judges kind of tear you up pretty good. So I think I did a passably good job at addressing most of those questions. But again, one of the things, Dan, I think we talked about, because we spent considerable time face-to-face, was, look, if you're a team and you want to go to the championships, you talk about your team. But a team really consists of individuals. Who are the players on that team, right? And in order to get a sense of somebody, I think it makes a big thing. So like I said, go to the scene, and then another thing is break bread. And I think I use that term with you guys. Break bread with people, because people want to see if you're credible. They want to hear you speak. They want to feel your passion, your intensity, or lack thereof. They want to say, hey, is this guy captaining the ship somebody that I feel like is going to show up, if I call them? Are they going to answer? Are they going to respond? Now, don't get me wrong. I have 200 or 300 emails every few days now. So it takes me a little bit of time sometimes. Again, we're getting more staff, but we're working on it. But I have, in early goings at Alcor, I sent a notice. I think we sent it in the newsletter or something, where my email address was in there. Like, I will do my damnedest to respond to people at the top, even if it's the smallest thing. We had something, somebody had an issue with a misspelling on a tag or something. And, look, I don't need to dip into that. But when you see an email from me at 11 p.m. or 1 a.m. that I'm dipping on it and I'm saying, look, we see you, we got you, we'll get it done for you, I think that engenders a certain confidence. So breaking bread with people, that face-to-face connection. And by the way, it's made a big difference. I can't tell you details on this, but I can tell you that I'd heard from some extraordinarily prominent confidential type members who I've met face to face with. They hadn't been met with by Alcor leadership ever, and they were like, we've been members for 20 years, 30 years. One of our special projects that we have coming up that we'll talk more about. It's a big deal. But I'll just give you one example, and I can talk about this because he's said I can say he's a member. But Charlie Mathau, so Walter Mathau, Most people know Walter Matthau from the movies back in the day and TV shows, but his son has been a 30-plus year OG. I call him an OG, original gangster or old guy or however you want to put it. But Charlie Matthau, is a member. And I was on a plane and I met with him, and that has resulted in some phenomenal things, I think, that will become more public as time goes on for Alcor. But our strength at Alcor is our members. If we collectively as a membership work together, we can do this thing. And I'll tell you more about what my vision is, but we can do this.
And James, why is it that you think so many great, smart, well-connected, resourceful people, why are so many of them afraid to be public about this?
Great question. Why are so many people reluctant to be public about their association either with Alcor or Cryonics? The best that I can understand is that it has to do with the broader culture. And again, I kind of look at Alcor and say that's an area that Alcor could have done better at in terms of the broader media culture and educating people. But right now, there's a number of these people who are in professional positions at the highest esteemed universities, for instance, or at some of the biggest companies in the world, or they're in very high level positions in maybe government or elsewhere. And they still have this kind of stigma where people think that they're trying to buy their way into immortality or something. And there's this kind of negative perception about it. And frankly, that has to do with what we call in PR positioning and orientation. And I think Cryonics for a long time was this really smart group of people who were really smart in the sciences, but didn't have a good, concept of public relations. And how years and years of negative press pieces and those sorts of things might make the culture difficult for you to achieve the end goals. It's not fair. It doesn't make any sense. Some of these stories and some of these things that slow us down because people don't want to be public, that would make a huge difference in terms of moving the ball forward. We can't access them and they don't want to be public yet because this broader cultural issue. Well, that broader cultural issue is the result of decades of not looking at the wrap. Because the scientists were so focused on the things that Alcor does really, really well, which is great for membership. It's really good for us in that core component. But it turned out that by not kind of paying a little bit of attention over here, they've now kind of created a culture that we now have to put energy into it aggressively. And it can be done, but it takes a lot of time. And I'm hopeful. I'm talking to some of these people, and I think some of them have come out a little more publicly. I can't talk about who they are. We can't confirm or deny. But if you do some Google searches, you'll see that there's been a little movement. And that movement's not accidental, folks. I mean, that's an effort. That's a reorienting of the ship in the PR direction.
So you're flying around. You're talking to these high-profile people. You're breaking bread. You're getting chewed out. You have your ear to the ground, and you're listening to members and their wants. So after all that, what do they want? What do the members want? What are the things you're repeatedly hearing that they are really yearning for?
So membership, after having traveled and talked to many, many members now and face-to-face and private conversations, and by the way, it's not just high profile. I care about every member. I've met with members that are living a life of quietness and far out places, and every opinion is important. And frankly, they really do boil down to kind of a top 3 or top 5 list. I will be going through that in detail at our strategic meeting that's coming up in Colorado. I think you guys are going to touch on. But the long and short of that is, number one, look, this is personal, and people want to feel like they are going to get recovered, and they're going to get recovered with the best available technology and the best available implementation and service at the time. That's just kind of 101. So we'll put it up there at the top of the list. And secondarily, they want a website that's easy to navigate, that's clean and crisp, and that the sign up and membership processes are easy. and clean and crisp. Okay, I hear you loud and clear. It's not something I can snap my fingers on and do overnight, because there are a number of competing interests. There are a number of opinions about what ought to be on the website, for instance. And that really gets into this difference between a research organization versus some of the service component, right? The members want to be serviced very well, but we're also supposed to be having research and public education. Well, that requires a whole different style. And do you merge the two, or do you separate the two and split the two and things like that? So there's that component, but I would say, sign up processes, insurance, funding, make sure that they get it. But frankly, and I would say the majority of members I've met with, not everyone, but the majority of members understand that this is an experiment. This is the Apollo moon landing mission of physics, biology, chemistry. They understand that we're not there yet, right? There hasn't been a demonstrable revival of a brain. There hasn't. But they want to make sure that Alcor is at the forefront of doing as much as we can with regards to the research to get there, right? I mean, again, that goes to that research component of Alcor, 501c3, scientific, nonprofit, research and education. So, yeah, we understand that our bodies, our brains, we're donating to science, but they want that science to be good. And they want a robust, scientific research component. Because let's say it doesn't work, but their brain or their body contributed to the advancement so that someday somebody else can have it work, maybe their kids or their grandkids. They care about that. They get it, right? And so they want to feel like their money, their body is going into some place that is contributing to the science. And so we are, trust me, I'm talking to PhDs and I'm talking to some of the top technology people in the world, and not all of them want to talk to me, I've reached out to a couple of the leaders on, for instance, on traumatic encephalopathy, chronic, CTE research. I've reached out to labs that are doing organ banking, which is a big part of what my initiatives are going to be, because, I'm a big believer that you have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. And I know that everybody wants to swallow this elephant and say, I want my brain to be revived tomorrow. Well, of course we do. Yeah, that's the point. But guess what? You got to do simpler things first, man. You got to crawl before you walk, before you run. And I have all these little platitudes that I throw out there, like breaking bread. But you know what? Go to the scene, breaking bread, crawl before you walk, before you run. They matter. They make a difference. Because, again, that cuts out noise. When you boil it down to those simplistic statements, it allows me to move and push and gain inertia faster than if I allow a bunch of noise to kind of cloud it and tell me, oh, well, what about this? What about that? Keep your eyes on the prize, man. Go after this right here, right now. This is what we need to accomplish today to get to there tomorrow.
And let's take the flip side on that, though. And some of them will just kind of be the opposite. But, you're getting chewed out for 2.5 hours. What are they complaining about? And what are the similar complaints you're hearing across the board?
Well, one of the big issues, and I should add this to the list, and I know about this issue, for instance, I spent a substantial amount of time, and I've spent, again, this is one of those things this goes back to Max, one of your questions of, it's kind of the opposite, but what did I think would be really easy, but that's been turned out to be incredibly difficult? One was insurance, because that's money. People are money motivated. I thought everybody wants 1,500 members and want that insurance money. I'm not talking about individual policies. I'm talking kind of a grander scheme kind of thing in terms of how to fund some of this. But no, the other thing was a wearable, remote monitoring of health. That is a major issue for many of our members, especially as they get older. We know that there are apps, there are what we call wearables. And again, this is an area I've been involved in a long time as an attorney, just in medicine and technology and stuff that I've done. So I've been aware of wearables and followed it. It sounds like it ought to be as simple as calling up one of the hardware makers and software providers and saying, hey, we've got 1,500 members plus, I think Emil's got 500 plus now. I mean, there's thousands of people that want your product and they want this application. I would think you would love to have that monthly revenue. I'm handing it to you. I'm walking it into you. Now in business, in the for-profit business sense, I'm coming from a place where I'm like, that is a gift. Like that is a absolute gift. And yet they won't touch it. They won't touch it. And I'm like, how, why? And they're like, well, liability. Or they go online and they read some case, some media piece from 30 years ago that, none of those people are even involved in this process. I mean, what are you talking about? But that's where that rap from 30 years ago, comes back to bite you in the ass. I've seen it time and time again in emerging technology companies, and like the electric. There's a lot of avenues I could go down the roads on this, but that is one of the things. The wearables. Listen, I hear you, members, loud and clear. It is not nearly as easy or simple. In fact, it's almost impossible. In part because they don't want liability, particularly in the U.S. I think in Europe, there's probably maybe easier to implement. But in the U.S., these places don't want to have any kind of accountability or responsibility with regards to notifying for a health condition in an emergency. And then if for some reason that notice doesn't come through and Alcor can't get there quickly enough, they don't want it. They don't want to touch it. It's frustrating for me. And Alcor is, look, we have 18 staff now. I mean, we're not in a position to set up a medical monitoring device service. Like, it's not realistic. Now, if there's some big donor out there, and I know there's a few of you, I don't know if you listen here or if you do, but hear me out. Like, there's probably an app that could be made and a way to do it. And trust me, I've had some very smart software engineers that are members that have said to me, hey, we can make the app. There is a corresponding issue, which is, again, we don't have the staff. Ideally, I would contract that out. Now, people have heard of like Life Alert, I've fallen and I can't get up, and there's Bayview Medical is another one, the Aura Ring, or Aura, I don't know how to pronounce that, but I never get that right. But Apple Watch, there's various brands you can quote, and everybody goes to me, James, just call up Apple.
As if it were that easy, right?
Sure,
to call Apple.
I'll get right on it.
Tim Cook, hey, I got something for you.
Yeah, exactly.
But thankfully, we've had the wonderful Nikki Olson on this program, who has made it one of her life's missions to try and put something like this together. But like you said, just the liability component means that the bigger players really are afraid to touch the exposure of it. And and you might say, look, we have 1,500 members. They might say, well, come back to me when you have 100,000, and then we might consider setting up the entire legal apparatus that will be necessary for a big outfit like them to expose themselves in that way. But a small company, maybe like what Nikki Olson has in mind, might be the right kind, because you really are limiting the exposure in a lot of ways by going small.
I have not said no to a viable application or offering. It's just, and I know very smart people like you mentioned, Nikki, and others are actively working on it. I just think that people have to temper their expectations with regards to what Alcor is here to do. We are here to be the best in the world at recovering and preserving brains and using it for research, ultimately with the hope of some sort of revival. And a medical monitoring service, those are dollars that right now, it's not like there's just this huge excess of dollars to be applied to that. Now, mind you, more than happy to contribute and work with people who are trying to do it. And if they want to set it up as a service and it makes sense, great, let's talk. But can I stop what I'm doing today? And I feel bad because these members are really aggressively coming at me for it. And I think they're just not understanding that if I were to stop what I'm doing today to focus on that, to the exclusion of other things, that's not a good result for any of us, really. It's not what Alcor's core mission is, for sure. We're not a medical monitoring service. Doesn't mean I can't support it. Doesn't mean if there was an easy button I wouldn't push it. It just means there isn't one.
So we got some wants, we got some complaints, and I assume you've met some, very interesting people. So just to kind of give an idea for listeners and viewers of some of those, could you kind of give us, maintaining confidentiality, of course, but give us one or two of the most notable stories or circumstances you encountered, on your travels meeting all these Alcor members?
I have met. I mean, there are great stories. Unfortunately, I can't really share some of them because it'd be identifiable. But uh, we have a member who's a sword swallower, professional sword swallower. I thought that was cool. You wouldn't think so. The guy just looks like one of us walking around. He doesn't look like that, but very articulate, very cool. But that's one of the ways he's made his living in life is doing that. I've met with people who literally you use their invention every single day of your life, 10 times a day, probably. I've met with people that have written books. I mean, there's a book out, the First Immortal, which I think everybody should read if you're interested in cryonics at all. And The Truth Machine is another one. That is a phenomenal book and mentions cryonics. And I'm talking about some things that mention kind of cryonics in the popular culture and that mention them in a positive way. So I encourage people to look at things like that. We have a diversity of interests, meaning we have people that they might be some of the top, electronic music people in the world that are completely a polar opposite than the scientist who's in a lab all day. And you would never think that I met with people in Wall Street, right? I mean, and when you talk about the diversity of humankind in thought and in physicality and everything else, I have met with people that are the titans of industry, and then the people who are doing electronica music. I mean, are just pick something, and I love that because think about it. If you're on a boat, and I think sometimes I think of cryonics and even Alcor as kind of this boat into the future. And if you're on a boat into the future, you don't want everybody to have the same skill set and talents, right? You want the people who wake up in 100 years to be able to offer this fora of just random cool stuff from 100 years ago, and they're not all the same. And they are so far different on the spectrum of just everything you could pick. That to me is actually greatly encouraging. That tells me that we're probably onto something when you have people who may not politically or economically or artistically ever, align with each other, but they are all in agreement on this, on why this is important to do or to try. The beauty of cryonics is in the attempt. You're attempting to evolve humanity by instead of tossing away decades of experience and knowledge and education, instead of just throwing that in the dump, you're trying to preserve it and you're trying to make it accessible, right? I mean, that's world-changing stuff, and we're all choosing and making a conscious choice to contribute and participate in that experiment. And we're a group of people. I've met people from. I mean, we had a case off the coast of Africa. Okay, so there were people that were literally in the geographic furthest point accessible from Arizona, right? I mean, and then we have people from I don't know about every country, but we have members that are from probably every continent other than the poles, I guess, because I don't think people live there. But
No penguins yet in the doors.
No penguins. There's probably a scientist or two that's hanging out in the poles. There might be members, but no. So those are things that I have been incredibly encouraged by, and that our members would not experience on the individual level. But I want to explain that you are in the best company in the world. I mean, you really are. You couldn't ask for better shipmates in terms of just, holy crap, I met this person today, and this person's so interesting, and they're doing this in the world, We got that. We're good.
I've heard the phrase used, an ambulance to the future, but this is the first time I've heard a ship to the future. So I can see you think about it slightly differently from the normal analogies.
And that ship to the future, I think, is why it's so important that we're doing what we're trying to do. You know what I mean? It's not about just us individually. It's about what is our contribution to the future collectively. Right? You guys offer something. Each one of you individually, Max, Dan, you guys offer something. Right? I mean, you know something about the world. I don't. I don't know how to do a podcast, and a podcast is a cultural phenomena that has changed how people relate and learn information and everything in this time period in history. You guys are on top of that. Well, you're going to be able to make a contribution someday if your brains were ever, accessed in the future. You're going to be able to talk about, yeah, this is what was involved with changing how people communicate and how people learn. Well, I can't get that perspective from somewhere else. I can't offer that perspective. You guys can. And we have a whole diversity of that. So that excites me. That's cool. That's why we do this, right? That's why we're involved.
What? And you've now had a chance to speak to all these different people, like you're putting it, all the different, hopefully all these people that are going to be, they're all specialized in something different, and we're all going to be in that ship together. Many of us already are. Did you find some kind of through line that connects all of these different members, like something that we all have in common, that we're all cryonicists because we're all looking to achieve something, or are we different even in that regard as to why we're doing this?
Well, I think I probably should know better than to make sweeping generalizations on anybody, but the members I've met with, now mind you, that's a group of people that care enough to meet with me, right? So that probably says their interest level is maybe higher than some people that just mail in their dues or something. But the commonality, what I call the commonality of interest, again, my single sentence platitudes, but they serve me well. The commonalities of interest in cryonicists, I think generally, and this is the story that ought to have been told 40 years ago. The commonality of interest is that we collectively, we are crowdfunding life. We are crowdfunding the continuation of human knowledge. Okay? That's what we're doing. And we're doing it in a demonstrably factual way. We are literally crowdfunding by sending in dues on a monthly basis, by participating, donating our bodies to science for the research. We are crowdfunding, not death. And I was thinking about this because I have to do a big media thing soon. And the media loves to fixate on death and how morbid this is and those sorts of components of it. And I'm like, it came to me the other day that orientation is 180 degrees opposite of what we, I think, linearly, universally, think in cryonics about why we do what we do. Now, mind you, we have a whole spectrum of people who think we're going to merge with computers, people who think we're going to come back as robots, people who think whatever your revival choice is. We have people who 100% believe it's going to happen, and we have people who believe it's greater than 0 but less than 0.01. I mean, we have the whole spectrum in terms of what the success rate of this could be. But universally, the people who are actually sending money in to do this thing and are donating their body, they're doing it because they want to contribute to the advancement of life.
Yeah, that's one of the something I've come to realize being around enough cryonicists that positivity for life is actually more motivating for actually more cryonicists than the fear of death. And Max actually did a survey in which he was able to kind of statistically bore that out. More cryonicists actually feel this kind of want for the future and passion for life more than they have this kind of dreadful fear of death. So from the perspective of spreading the word, I actually think that's the better angle objectively. So I'm glad you've picked up on that.
Well, so people, I like to provide context. I know I talk a lot, but for context, when I started this job, I didn't just start the job. I researched, I studied at night, and I actually went back into the government archives because there's nothing new under the sun, right? That's another platitude. Most problems in humankind have been thought of or addressed sometime in the past, right? You can go to Plato, you can go to philosophers in the past, you can go wherever you want to go, but likely there's somebody that's kind of thought of or materialized an issue. And it turns out that the U.S. government did do just that back in the 60s and 70s as it related to emerging technology. At the time was considered impossible, but organ donation and organ transplantation. So, even as the 50s and 60s, it was thought to be almost impossible or would be impossible to say, for instance, do a heart transplant. Well, those are ubiquitous today. I mean, they happen regularly. But the U.S. government was having a really big problem, particularly in this country, with the culture surrounding donation of organs. And so they actually spent, I think it was $50 million. And this stuff is available. You got to dig for it. But it's available on the National Institute of Health's website and some other places. But they did these deep psychological studies of what motivate or would motivate people to donate organs. So that's where I started. That's what I looked at. I actually did my research. I spent hours at night reading this stuff. And I said the orientation. So they spent $50 million, and I just got it for free from reading it. But they found that people were motivated to donate organs kind of in a 1-2 basis. The first basis was that they would themselves feel good about doing it and possibly saving a life. And the second was that even if they couldn't live and they were in this terrible accident, but that their contribution, might contribute to the science and influence other people to also donate, right? So there was this kind of mixed motivating factor, and I think that cryonics really ought to orient publicly to that, because it's the truth. Like we talked about, the people that are doing this, the motive for them doing it is not just for themselves, because if you go off of, I'm just, I'm going to come back someday, people don't like that. It's almost this kind of selfish thing that people kind of have this knee-jerk, aversion to, because they say, only rich people can do it, and they just want to preserve themselves while everybody else dies. No. Don't even frame it like that. Like, no, look, if this works, great. If it doesn't work, my donation has contributed perhaps to somebody, even if it's not the brain, maybe it contributes to long-term storage of hearts or lungs or kidneys, because all of that stuff has to happen before we get to test the brain, right? Just ethically. You need to show you can do it on simpler structures than the brain before you test the brain, because ethically you don't want to do it on a brain until you've seen that proof of concept, right? So focus on that. Like, that's a great story to tell. And that's what $50 million of taxpayer dollars got us in terms of educating us on how to do the PR on this. Okay, cool. It's a great story. Why not tell it?
I always think of being signed up for. I always think of how lucky I am to be able to be signed up for Cryonics. What a privilege it is to get a chance to partake in this endeavor as you're describing it. And I hope more people can come to see it that way, as more people hear about it and more people hopefully sign up. So I want to switch gears a little bit. Everybody listening and watching will have heard a little blurb prior to your introduction about the upcoming strategic meeting happening in Colorado on the 25th and 26th of August. So that's going to be in a place called Estes Park. It's not too far from Denver. So I think it's about an hour and a half outside of Denver, at least out from the airport. Could you give us a very brief overview of what's going to be happening there, and then we'll jump into the different items as we go through them. But just give us a first, top level structure.
Sure, and I'm going to talk about Alcor's strategic conference this year. We're doing something different, and I think that's part of that new attitude that I'm trying to bring. That morale piece of acting like we are the world's best, because we are. And treating my team like that too, right? I want to get us out into the world. But we this year are hosting our strategic conference and board meeting at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. There's reasons for that. And part of that is, and I should say on the dates, people are arriving on the 25th, the open public board meeting. So this is really, we're not calling it a conference because we're not doing these kind of open lectures about different topics. It's really about Alcor's strategic planning and things, but we wanted to make Alcor accessible. This was another thing I'd heard from members, was they didn't feel like they knew who all the board was, or how did they talk to the board, and they didn't know. Well, look, the board's all going to be there. It's public, in the sense that it's public to Alcor members to attend, and you'll have an opportunity to talk to people. And so on the 26th, which is the Saturday, from I think 10 until 5, that is going to be a series of presentations on Alcor's new initiatives, and we're going to talk about the good and the bad. We'll talk about some of the things you mentioned, as the medical monitoring, the insurance piece. What are we doing on the service component? What can we do? What can't we do? I'll be straight with people. This is about credibility, and we talked about this face to face. I don't think you guys can say that I've ever tried to hide the ball to you. I've been real straightforward. But this conference is going to be an opportunity for members, and also, by the way, it's a give back to members. And by that I mean this. The Stanley Hotel is giving a substantial discount on rooms. It is absolutely a beautiful location. So Arizona, if you've been following it, it sucks right now. It's 115, 120 degrees. That's not pleasurable for anybody. So and I know there's been some criticisms of cost, and people have said, why is Alcor spending money for this? Guys, come on, give me some credit. All right, we have some donations. We've gotten substantial discounts. In fact, the Stanley Hotel is working with us on rooms for Alcor, for instance, as a nonprofit. I can't, I'm not going to get into the details and all that, but we're not dumb. We're making sure we're being responsible, and we are. But at the same time, we're providing an opportunity to give back a little something to members. You ought to feel like you're part of something special. You are part of something special. You're part of not an exclusive club. We want it open to people, but you're part of a special group and a special club. And where else to celebrate that but at the base of the Rocky Mountains? It's beautiful, and it's cooler than Scottsdale, Arizona by a large margin. So Alcor will be introducing its new, part of its new initiatives, which is what we call our DART team, which are the Deployment and Recovery Team. I can say that much. They are a very special group of human beings. They have recently assisted Alcor for the first time in Alcor's history, we've had multiple simultaneous deployments. That means we've had call-outs to go all over the world at the same time, at different locations all over the place. And we've successfully done that. And we have had some of the just fantastic results in terms of the after results and what we're looking at scientifically. And so the DART team is going to be there, mind you, subject to if there's a call out, if there's a deployment, they'll have to go. But our board will be there. I will be there. Marji will be there. Most of our staff will be there. There's also a kind of a special thing that will be presented at that time for Alcor members to in the future kind of enjoy, and we're kind of creating a relationship with the Stanley, and not just the Stanley, but the Stanley has a huge campus, and on that campus they have a variety of nonprofit space to do different things in the arts and sciences, and there will be all things going well. We're still kind of finalizing details, but it is a very exciting project that we're undertaking there. So that will be introduced to the members at that time, and they will get some special access to some things. There's also some substantial media occurring. So I should tell anybody who does wish to attend that there will be television, film crews, and things there. And they're vetted. We know who they are. We know what they're doing. Like we said, we've got Charlie Mathau. We've got some Hollywood royalty, as it were, in the membership at Alcor. And there's some special projects going on related to that I think is good for everybody. So hey man, I'm actually really looking forward to it. I'll be working like a dog. I think I'm doing 20-hour days. The board's, this is also the board's opportunity on Sunday. This part isn't open to the public, but I encourage our members to go to the Rocky Mountains. It's at the base of the Rocky Mountains. Go for a hike. Go see some things. Beautiful, beautiful little break for you. And on Sunday, though, I'll be working. That's the board's opportunity to grill me and tell me what I should be doing better, probably. But that'll be it's a working weekend for me. But at least it'll be 30 degrees cooler, I hope. So.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely awful in Arizona right now. Pictures of the cacti wilting and all this kind of stuff, which is just unbelievable. So folks should expect to fly in on Thursday or Friday or such, but Friday there's nothing specific that they're...
For members on Friday, it's nothing, that Alcor's doing a private staff board kind of dinner, which is an opportunity for our staff, of course, to talk to the board and do some things. So Friday night is arrivals, right? So, and by the way, there is a shuttle from the Denver airport to Estes Park to the Stanley. I think it's $100. But here's another thing I'll mention. Alcor's intentionally kept. Now I understand there's travel expenses, so you really do want to treat this like a little break and vacation. But Alcor's cost to members for this is $75. That's all it is, and that's actually to cover the food cost. Because on Saturday there will be a breakfast and there'll be a lunch catered. for members, that are attending the strategic board meeting. That's the public part of the meeting. So we do have some costs, and that's it, from Alcor's perspective. Now, when you want to sign up with the Stanley, you do have to mention that you're getting a room, for the Alcor conference, and there's Janine, I think is her name, who will hopefully get in touch with you. And if you have any problems, email Diane or email me or call Alcor. But there is a substantial discount on the room rate for people coming for the Alcor meeting. So that's important. Obviously, there's a cost to fly into Denver, $200 or $300. The rooms are going to be discounted. Some of the food on Saturday will be covered, but the food on property is amazing, by the way, I have to say. And they have some really cool stuff. That property was in the movie The Shining. I should say that. It's public, so I'll say that. It's a little bit of a weird association, but nonetheless, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. The food is amazing, so make sure you book reservations. There's a magic show on property. There's a couple different shows. So like Saturday night. But really the beauty of this is there's going to be some just incredibly good, like, smart people in attendance. I mean, there's going to be people that are really doing things, and so you'll have an opportunity to network. It's a small property when you get into the main, like, kind of dining and bar areas and things, and so you'll be mingling with people and having an opportunity to really meet some people that you might not have met otherwise. And I think it's a great thing. I know who's coming. I can't say, I'll let them speak for themselves, but there are some people that have done some things, and it's a great opportunity to talk about what we're doing.
Do you know around how many people you're expecting? 100, 300?
Well, in terms of the numbers of people, it's not huge. I mean, obviously there's a travel expense, and this was a little bit of short notice because we were finalizing some details. But my understanding, like between board, staff, our DART team is going to be there, like our spouses are going to be there, a lot of them. So there's probably right now at least 50, I would guess, 50 to 100 people. And there's a space, there's kind of this conference space. It's a separate building, but it's absolutely gorgeous. There's like this lake behind it with the Rocky Mountains jutting out, and I mean, it's wild. So I'm excited, man. I'm pumped to do this, and this is the kind of environment and experience that Alcor members we ought to be delivering to our membership, right? Feel like treat them special because they are special. There's a reverence and respect. And I wanted to make a point, Max, you said something earlier about kind of the ship into the future or emergency medicine in the future. I look at Alcor in a very specific way. So when I think of like the patient care bay and the reverence is not just that there's people's bodies there. The reverence is that these people have intentionally committed themselves to donating their body to advance the science for all of us, right? I look at it that Alcor is where the past and the present and the future, so Alcor is where the past, the present, and the future all come together. Think about it, right? You have people, we have somebody who was born in the 1880s. That's the past, right? You have the present, the people that are working there today. And you have the members that are signed up that someday will be there. That's the past, present, and future. And we're all coming together from all walks of life to advance the science. That is a hell of a great story to tell. Let's talk about that, with the public. When we're talking about what is cryonics, stop focusing on we're coming back as robots or humanoids. Sure, maybe we are, maybe we're not. I don't know. But that doesn't need to be the sizzle. The sizzle's right in front of us. The sizzle's what we as people from all walks of life are coming together to try and accomplish.
Yeah, I like that framing of it. Quite honestly, I can see that as a pretty decent slogan. Something like the past, present, and future coming together to celebrate life, or some such thing. So I'm gonna remember that for later and write it down. I do think that's a moving way to put it, and I'm not particularly sentimental, so that says something.
I think that's going to be on our patient care bay.
Oh,
I actually
awesome.
think that's going to be kind of, as we start, again, we don't, the wrap part, we still need to get more money to kind of decorate and I think upgrade some things at Alcor internally. Again, the science is great, but, maybe the wallpaper, maybe the paint could be better. But as part of that, I want to put something about this is where the past, present, and future meet. It really is. Like it is legitimately where the past, present, and future meet every day. And I get to walk in those doors and play a role in it. That's what motivates me. That's what inspires me.
So, James, when we met in person, you asked me kind of a strange question. You asked me if I could have anybody in the world come out to get my body after I de-animated, who would it be? And I was trying to figure out what you were getting at. And I kind of thought about it for a second, and I half jokingly and, sarcastically blurted out, the first thing that came to mind, which was the Navy SEALs, like whatever, the Navy SEALs. Like I didn't expect that to be the right answer. And you were like, bingo. And I,
Well,
and I did a double take. I was like, oh, are you serious? So at this point I had kind of just walked right into a trap you set for me. And it took me a second to recalibrate. So I want to pick up right there where we left off that part of our conversation, and say, what the hell were you talking about? The Navy SEALs? Like, what's going on?
well, I want to be cautious and let people tell their own stories, but let me put it this way. As a leader manager at Alcor, one of the things I've talked about is coming in with fresh perspectives and fresh eyeballs and maybe some different tools in my toolkit than other people have. And one of the things in emerging technology, a lot of that technology is either healthcare related or military related, or there's a crossover, right? And so in my background, I've known some people and either first responders or military people who have specialized training. Let me put it that way. And they happen to be, frankly, the best in the world because they've got millions of dollars of training in doing what's called medical evacuations, medical recoveries. And it occurred to me, I'm like, well, when these guys roll out of the service, and they're mostly guys, there's some girls, but or women, I should say, but when they roll out of the service, that transition to civilian life can be challenging. And they were in a role that was obviously difficult for a variety of reasons, but now there's an opportunity to kind of have that same deployment and that same adrenaline rush of, hey, we've got to go somewhere and be there on time. We have to have a kit, and it's very specialized, and there's training, and they're going anywhere in the world. And so that transition's easier for them. And it occurred to me, well, why couldn't we assemble a team of people that would be in a position to give our members the absolute best service that taxpayer dollars can train for? And so I went out and sought people with that kind of specialized training, and this isn't to the exclusion of contractors. We still have contractors and use them, but certainly when you have multiple simultaneous deployments, the options out there are fairly limited. There's very few people who do this in the world. And so I thought it would make sense for Alcor to have a robust capability, and frankly, we ought to be setting the standards. Hey, we've been around 50 years. Just by virtue of time, we ought to be the ones setting the standards in the world for what we do. And so I made it my goal to accomplish that. And I think that as you'll get to meet in Colorado, you will get to meet some people, and as members, talk to them face to face, hopefully. And they can tell you their stories. But we have a group of very highly trained people. Let me put it that way. I'll tease it like that, but it's their stories to tell. But these are the best in the world at what they do, and they have shown it. And I'll give you an example. We had a case where, in the past, just even people that are kind of like paramedics and things, moving a body is very difficult. Okay, like getting it into and out of a vehicle and transitioning it, and doing that with ice and doing it with these things, the logistics of that are very difficult. Well, our team that we have now that is working, they've now done multiple deployments. They were able to move the bodies in certain circumstances in exponentially faster times due to their prior training. So Alcor, for instance, we couldn't afford to get that level of training, but it occurred to me that, hey, that level of training is out there. Why don't we see if we can capture it and apply it? And guess what? I think that there's some sort of kind of cosmic connection here in that these people, previously perhaps were in combat roles or other types of traumatic kind of situations, and now they're in the process of trying to recover people, like we said, for that ultimate greater good of benefiting life and benefiting continuity. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. And so I'm a big advocate of giving, veterans opportunities and transitioning into civilian life and what have you. And, knock on wood, we were able to put something together, and we call it our deployment and recovery teams. That's called a DART team, and that's under our medical response director, Shelby. And boy, I mean, we are seeing just phenomenal results. So, yeah, I don't want to say exactly who they might have been associated with. Some of them are more public than others in terms of what they've done in life. But I will tell you with confidence that we have some of the absolute best people on medical evacuations, and so good that your eyes are almost like you almost feel like what are you watching? When they click in, it's like watching a ballet. And these aren't people that necessarily worked together before or danced together before. But man, when that moment clicks, all of a sudden it's like muscle memory or something. I don't even know how to explain it, but I witnessed it, and I couldn't believe some of what I've seen. I mean, it's been impressive, and you'll see some of that if you attend the conference, or sorry, not the conference, the strategic meeting. So you'll get to see some of that.
And so these people have kind of very expensive military training and backgrounds and excellent name recognition. But to play devil's advocate, what do they know about SST?
Well, when it comes to any team that Alcor, for instance, would deploy, obviously, yeah, they might come to the table with a variety of special skills, and some of them may not be in the military background, but they might be very high level, for instance, in first responder with rescue training or fire paramedic training, things like that. But it's a combination of groups of people, medical and military type people, because you need both. But of course, man, I'm not going to half bake anything. If you've learned anything about me, I've put a lot of thought into things. So before anybody has gone out, they have gone through a comprehensive training program in specified techniques related to, like you said, SST. We're now calling it DART, which is deployment and recovery. But as you may or may not know, Alcor hosts very lengthy training for people that are involved with this, and we even have cadaver training, for instance, which you're actually practicing on cadavers, and you're going through all the equipment for days on end. It's not just a day. It's not just a half a day program. It's a long program, and we also are doing what we call modules that people have to pass and they have to show competency on. So again, that's part of us setting the standard. That's what I want Alcor to be. Even if we haven't necessarily been that, that's what we are to become, is we are to be the standard bearers. What does that mean? That means the people that are at the front leading the charge. And to do that, you have to have credibility. And to have credibility, you have to set standards. So that is what we're working actively towards. And I don't want to say too much about that because, again, until it's ready to be public, but we are absolutely working on standard protocols. And we want to set those standards. So we're working on it. But they've all been through all that training, absolutely, 100%.
And who did the training, or who does the training for them? Is that the new medical director, or?
Well, at Alcor, we have a variety of people that assist with our training. They're both in-house on staff, and they're also outside contractors. So we have a combination of people, and what we do is we kind of identify skill sets. And again, that highest and best use phrase that I use. So we have, like, for instance, we have a cardiothoracic surgeon. That's a big deal. That's not cheap. Surgeons aren't cheap to bring in for a day or two. We have, people with paramedic training, people with nurse training, trauma nurse training. We have practitioners in the field that some of you probably know of. I don't want to name people simply because, I don't know that's their business, but certainly people that you've heard of are involved, and it is all done with a large degree of thought. I mean, we have spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of human hours before any training occurred. And oh, by the way, I've actually had a trainer observe our training so that we could take the training as a beta test and improve on it. So we have somebody who has very advanced skill sets in training reactive teams. Okay, so there's a very specialized skill set there that says, hey, how are you conducting your training? And then they look at it and then they take it apart. And then for the next training, it's going to be better. Remember what I talked to you about is every day be better. I mean, that's personal, man. I'm not saying I walked in the door and I knew how to conduct this kind of training. I have people that know how to do this at the highest levels, and those people are even training us to be trainers.
And so far with this DART team or the different members of it, how many cases have they participated in actual, Alcor cryopreservation cases thus far?
When it comes to how many cases the DART team's been deployed on at this point, and again, there's kind of a rotating basis, so not any one person on it, and that's also by design, by the way. So there's kind of an on-off cycle, and that's to replicate some other high-performance teams and the way they operate. But I want to say, because we've had multiple simultaneous deployments, somewhere between 5 and 8. I don't know the exact numbers because, frankly, I've been trying to make things happen every day, and our medical response director would know exact numbers, but I know they've been all over the place. I know they've been in one state and had to go to another state and then go to another state. So it's hard to keep track of sometimes, but there's been multiple so far. And frankly, under the circumstances, because when people die, this is another thing members have to understand. We don't control when and how and where people, die. Or deanimate, as you say, Dan. And the circumstances are different every single time. That's hard because you don't know what you're stepping into. You get on that plane and you get out of that plane and you don't know, is the local environment going to have everything you need? Is it going to be friendly? There's only so much stuff you can take with you. These are complex missions every time. So, but they've done great. We're really happy with what we're seeing so far. And of course, by the way, I should say, this isn't a one-off. Like, I've already done the legwork. Maybe when I was doing some of my travels, I might have been meeting with people all over the country. People with similar skill sets that we might bring to bear.
And so for the individuals with these kinds of backgrounds, I presume obviously they're great at, the on-call aspect, the getting where they need to be in a timely fashion aspect, perhaps, the medical training. And I assume all those are very thoroughly within their wheelhouse. But for kind of standby stabilization transport, there's also some soft skills involved. So
100%.
How would these individuals be trained for, more delicate issues like, placating a hostile family member, or sweet talking nurses, or persuading hospital administrators and to be more cooperative, and this kind of more light-handed touch? Where is that going to come from?
So Dan, you've asked me what our teams might have in terms of capabilities and skill sets with relation to light-hearted touches or light touches. Have you met me, man? I've thought about all that. Our teams are deliberately structured so that they have people that have that kind of people touch. So, for instance, you might want somebody who is just a mountain of a person who can move, 600 pounds of dry ice. But at the same time, you need somebody who can talk to the hospital nurse administrator who's really hostile because they read a negative article about Alcor. This has actually happened. And so, our teams don't just consist of one type of person. I don't know if you know about small unit tactics, but small unit tactics, they actually have people that are trained in individual specialties, right? And their temperament, this has to do with what's called temperament. Their temperament is, you guys probably remember like the ASVAB, right? Where they kind of weeded you out based on your temperament. Well, certainly in our selection process, there's a selection process. We vet people. Like when it wasn't just that there was this one group of people. There was a lot of people. And out of that group of people, we're selecting different types of people. and they have different backgrounds. So there might be a nurse. There might, you know, who's great at that is firemen. Everybody likes a fireman. Not everybody likes a policeman, right? But maybe you need a policeman who can be a little more aggressive in some certain circumstances in order to go get dry ice, for instance, or something. They know where to go. They know how to navigate the town. But you need that fireman who's going to be like, hey, look, I'm here to help you. And they know how to have that tone, and they've been trained to deal with a traumatic situation. So absolutely, Dan, we 100% have put thought into the temperaments and the different variety of skill sets that we want on our teams. Again, still a work in progress, but so far been very happy with the results. Very happy.
And you said at the strategic meeting we will be able to meet some of those folks and get to talk to them and.
Hey man, I can't force these guys and gals to do anything. They're tough. They're tough folks, but I think they're all looking forward. This is, like I said, a beautiful, beautiful environment. And I think that they are looking forward to kind of seeing the people that we're here to serve. And again, that here to serve thing is a genuine statement. They get it. And I think, frankly, they kind of like it.
And are you still intending to use outside contractors on a case-by-case basis? I mean, I know that, or I've heard that SA is defunct or something since Saul Kent, got into a doer. That's what I've heard. I don't know if it's true. But ICE is still around, right? Eric and Aaron. So are you still intending to use them on a case-by-case basis, or is it all going to be in-house, or what's your plan there?
You know, a lot of people are interested in kind of the shifting dynamics of what was SST or DART and some of the contractor versus inside relationships and those sorts of things. You know, I don't think that that we necessarily exactly understand all those dynamics just yet. Like you said, you're hearing some things. By the way, this goes to what I talked about earlier about my noise factor. Okay, like I hear things too. I hear all kinds of things. And I don't know, like I'm not an outward facing in terms of trying to decipher what other people are doing. I'm focused on what we need to be doing today. And this isn't a dodge, because I know people are going to say, well, he's talking a lot. No, it's not a dodge. Like I will say right now, like absolutely, there are still, people that we intend to use or use, and they do their thing, and they have other clients too. Like you said, there's contractors. But what we're understanding as an organization, and this is unique to Alcor, it doesn't apply to any other Cryonics organization, but we are in the position, again, for the first time in Alcor's history, having multiple simultaneous deployments. That's important, meaning there's only so much bandwidth, even for the contractors. Like the contractors might be able to attend to one case. Well, what happens when you have three at the same time all over the world, right? So I think in the perfect world, there's this kind of multiple capacities out there, and I certainly see the value of that. But I don't control, I don't know. I'm hearing all kinds of things, so I don't know what people are doing or not doing, and I'm kind of focused on making sure that our members are taken care of in the best way that I have control over. And whatever these outside contractors are doing, obviously I think the more capacity and bandwidth, the better for everybody, but I don't control that. And there's a very finite group of people involved. So, I don't know. I don't think the question's been answered, and I don't think I can answer that question yet because I don't know.
So a work in progress.
There's like you said, when Saul Kent passed, I mean, there's been transition points, and then there's also other players that are coming into the field. I mean, every single day you hear something different, and I can only control what I'm responsible for and can control. And I'm not opposed to having multiple layers here. I think that's a good thing. But those people have to make a living too, and I don't know what other clients they have. For instance, I don't know their considerations, so I can't speak for that.
One thing you may be able to speak to, because this is your absolute, you will know more about this part than almost anything, is from a legal perspective. I was under the impression that if SST or what you're calling DART now that if it's an outside entity that's doing that portion of it, that gives you less exposure. It gives you some legal separation for that portion of dealing with the patient, the member, than if all of that is brought in house. It seems to me like there's more legal exposure if more of that's brought in house. Is that accurate, or is it only accurate under certain circumstances, or is it accurate but not as big a deal as some other component of this?
You know me, I like to ask questions, so let me bounce a question back at you. What country do you live in?
The most litigious country in the world.
That's right. That's right. And it turns out that you can get sued just about anything, getting out of bed in the morning. So, um, look, man, I just want to do a great job, and I want to do the absolute best job possible. And if I do that sincerely with good intent, uh, if people are going to sue, they're going to sue. And in America, or the United States, I should say, because America is bigger than that. But in the United States, it's a really unfortunate circumstance of our legal system that I, as an attorney or any attorney, can just name everybody. And they'll do that. They'll throw every single name on a complaint just to, I call it legal extortion, and I hate it. I hate it about my profession, and I think our legal system needs to dramatically change. But to get back to your question, I mean, frankly, I don't think of it in those terms. And maybe people would criticize me for that and say, "But James, you're an attorney." Obviously, I get it, man. I think I'm a decent attorney, but that's not the terms I think in. I think in the terms of what provides the highest and best service, right? And to the extent that I can control it, I want to do the best I can. Again, circumstances for every death in every case are individual and they're different. There is no perfect circumstance, really. I mean, maybe if you're in hospice or something, but this is a tough job. And if people are going to sue, they're going to sue. Do the best job possible, whether you're in-house or outside. I certainly wouldn't want to scapegoat it and say, oh gosh, well, tough, we used outside people. Well, hey, we picked those outside people, right? No, my job is to do the best job by the membership, whether that's inside or outside people, whatever the circumstances are. Again, it's not a perfect. There is no perfect solution. Uh, but no, do I think that in-house, outside, again, because a case may dictate that if we have multiple cases and we have to use outside contractors on a case, you know, okay. I mean, so no, I just don't think in those, in the way that question was framed. I don't think in those terms.
So reversing that, reversing that in a little bit, in a certain way, if CI or if Tomorrow Biostasis, Tomorrow Bio has a member in the U.S. and that member has a problem, could you imagine a world where the Cryonics Institute would call you and say, "Hey, we got a guy, in Oklahoma, and we don't have anybody available. Can you send your DART team? We'll pay you, to do or something like that." Could you imagine, in other words, sort of providing that internal service, that service that's internal right now, to some other entity, so that and perhaps helping you achieve more economies of scale, right? So keeping these guys in the field, experience, etc. Do you see that as something in the future that you'd be interested in doing?
So the question is, do I see some sort of collaboration and use of our team model for other organizations, perhaps in Cryonics? And one of the things I like to talk about, so like my clinic, again, I kind of go back to what I know. I think any well-run business ought to be replicatable. And by that I mean you ought to be able to do it here and then replicate it elsewhere and do it in a different circumstance but do the same thing, right? And so if we're doing more or opening more of my clinics and things like that, there's a model to that. So I think with the DART model, and by the way, I don't know if you guys are aware of this. I don't know if the membership for any of our organizations is aware of this, but we all talk. Like, I talk to Emil. We have a face-to-face meeting once a month with some of the groups and the leaders of these groups, and we're in a small boat. Like, whether we're competitors or whether we're collaborators or whatever, we kind of all have to get along, and we have to all kind of help each other where we can. So can I see a universe where, look, if my model turns out to be the highest and best model. Okay. I mean, I don't know what that looks like. There's paperwork involved, but I'm not sitting here saying that I'm going to try and like make sure other people don't get a good result. I think a good result with CI or a good result with Tomorrow Biostasis or a good result with Alcor is good for all of us. And to the extent we can contribute, but do it in a way that doesn't, obviously I have to think of membership. I'm in a weird role, right? Because as a member, I want to say everybody should have access to everything. But I have to protect Alcor's interests. I wear a certain hat in this role. But if it can be done and it can be done in a way that's beneficial for everybody, why not?
So in favor of collaboration where it can make sense, of course, with any and all entities that are reputable in the space.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't heard a proposal yet, and this is all in its infancy. But I can see a universe where, I mean, let's just look at other examples of business, right? There are plenty of examples where competitors end up being collaborators, end up being best friends. And, I think Emil is very good at certain things, just as a leader of an organization, right? I can give him credit for that. And I think certain organizations do things very well. I think CI does certain things very well, and does that mean I want to get in the business of doing what they do the way they do it? No, but it means I can see value to what they do and that there's a place for it. So is there a collaboration in the future? I mean, let's get there. But let's get there in a smart way. Let's get there in a way that we're taking care of our own business. Make sure your house is in order. And then when your house is in order, you can present it and say, okay, where can we do things here that work for everybody's benefit?
There's something that I've always been very happy with Tomorrow Bio specifically when it comes to, which is their for-profit, non-profit structure, where they have Tomorrow Bio as the customer-facing front-end component, does all the marketing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then that entity hands over a patient at a certain point to the European Biostasis Foundation, the nonprofit. And the two are obviously connected, but only loosely connected, so that you can maintain this kind of legal separation and other separation. So that seems to work really well, and in the sense that it's really, like you said, it's hard to do marketing in a small nonprofit. It's just really hard. Like it's not geared for that. It's not structured for that. The incentives are misaligned for that. While Tomorrow Bio has been killing it in their ability to just come up with interesting new ways to do marketing, videos, and their website's great, and their app for signing up, their sign-up process is great. They have a collaboration with an insurance company. They're doing a lot of things really well. And I think part of it is just because they don't have any baggage, right? They're starting fresh. But they have this dual structure that seems to me like it could work really well. Is there any possibility? Do you see a future where Alcor could create that and end up having a similar dual structure where Alcor and the Patient Care Trust and all this become the nonprofit back end, and then you have this kind of for-profit front end that can really specialize in stuff that, even because you don't want to threaten the 501c3 status of the organization, there's just some things you can't do. I mean, it's just, what is that, the commercialization doctrine, right? You probably heard of these things, and you just can't function too much like a business, like a real for-profit business. And that's kind of handicapping, I think, Alcor, in my opinion, to some extent. Do you see a way to get to that future from here, or would you just say, no, we never need to go there? There's other ways to get to where you're talking about, and I'm barking up the wrong tree.
Max and Dan, I'm honestly continuously impressed by the depth of your questions. They are very good questions. And so your question is there a universe where Alcor, in the operational sense, behaves or converts to, say, a for-profit for some components of it, in a similar model to what Tomorrow Biostasis is doing. And let me first preface it, and I always talk about context. Context is extraordinarily important, and people ask questions, but there needs to be context. Tomorrow Biostasis is a European entity. Okay, I don't. Now, by the way, I did actually study international law in London, but something that we talked about earlier is the United States is the most litigious society in the world by orders of magnitude, and that is what I'm trained in. So let me speak to it in this way: the model that you're talking about, which, by the way, absolutely on the wrap and the marketing. Well, if you're a for-profit, you have to market a product or service. Okay? Alcor is not a for-profit. We're a nonprofit research institute. So I'm actually not trying to market or sell a service. I'm genuinely not. It's a very different, like you actually said this. We're coming from very different places, both in what we can do and what we ought to be doing. And there's value for both, I think. But also, there's a context that Tomorrow Biostasis exists in within its legal and social framework in Europe that we absolutely do not exist in here in the U.S. I think that Alcor, in terms of its organizational structure, is the best model in the United States for the long-term benefit of its members. And there's some real reasons for that, because when you're reliant upon a for-profit model that signs up new members for operational expenses as a business model in the U.S., and again, I can't speak to how he's doing things, that's his business. I'm simply saying I'm a fairly smart guy, and I'm a fairly smart guy in starting up companies and entities, merging technologies. That is in my wheelhouse of experience and legal stuff. It does not work for what we're trying to do with the research, and it does not work for the long-term, I think, protection of our members. And that being said, there is a caveat. I do think that there are areas in the U.S., for instance, you can have kind of a for-profit subsidiary of a nonprofit, in certain circumstances that does certain things. Now, it has to flow up and it has to be done ethically and legally, and it's very nuanced stuff, and there's a lot of nuance to it. The good news is I do have some really smart attorney friends, and they kind of know that world. So I will never say never, other than I will say that in my leadership, I don't foresee the operational and research component of Alcor being a for-profit. However, I do know that Alcor has, for instance, some intellectual property and technologies that may have applications outside of what our core mission is scientifically, and that many nonprofits, for instance, universities, Stanford, Harvard, pick one, they develop technologies and then they license them out for other applications. Maybe it's healthcare, for instance. One of their professors develops a surgical tool, and that gets licensed out, but that money comes back in and services the goals of the nonprofit. I would think if you're a member of Alcor, that you would be very excited about that potential, because that's a revenue source that's not reliant upon your dues, that could greatly increase, if done right, could greatly increase how quickly Alcor reaches scientific milestones in research. That's why universities engage in those sorts of things. So those are kind of what they call public-private partnerships, or nonprofit/private partnerships and things. And this is stuff that the members probably aren't well aware of, but some of the technology at Alcor is absolutely fantastic in terms of potential applications. Now, can we monetize it for the benefit of membership? There might be some possibilities there. You think, you don't think I've thought about it? I mean,
that would function almost like an endowment to be able to continuously add it, provide funding for what Alcor is doing. But let me ask the for-profit question in a slightly different way, just to see if how you react to that. Let's say Joe, Jane, and Bob tomorrow go and start not a cryonics company per se, but a for-profit company whose only goal is to sign people up to eventually end up in a doer. But they don't have any doers anywhere. And then turns out a few months later, they call you up and they say, James, we got 5 people who are ready to go into a doer. Would you take them? And we'll pay you. We'll just write you a check for each one. Here you go, check. We'll give you some paperwork for each one. They're yours now. We'll have nothing else to do with them. They're fully yours, and would you take them? And then, so what would your answer to that be?
Well, Max, that's a question that has a number of legal nuances, particularly in terms of, for instance, in the U.S., you can't, buy and sell organs, for instance. You can't do that. You can't engage in that. I definitely want to set a high ethical standard for what we do. As you know, if you're a member of Alcor, you had to go through a bunch of paperwork and hoops, and it's kind of a pain in the ass, but it's a pain in the ass by necessity in the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act stuff. So to answer your question, I don't know. I mean, there's a whole lot of nuance there. I do believe that Alcor, on a very limited basis, will examine cases individually and say, are we the best result both for the science, because there's a research component we have to cater to. We absolutely have to be true to that. For the science, meaning perhaps this circumstance provides us with a unique access to people that died in a certain circumstance that we don't have access to, right? So there's a scientific research value to that. That gets overlooked. That needs to be part of what we think of. So maybe that's a factor. Maybe, the alternative to Alcor is nothing. Well, look, we're trying to preserve brains, right? That's what we do. So Alcor does have this kind, and being a nonprofit, by the way, I know you said they'd pay for it, but understand, and this is where the for-profits, I think, get in trouble. And I don't know, I'm talking about the past. I don't know what the new models are, but I think for-profits in the past grossly underestimated the losses you take on cases. Cases are rarely profitable. Okay, and when I say profitable, I'm in the nonprofit space. I'm talking about there's rare instances where you have a whole bunch of extra money at the end of a case. To do it right, to employ all of this, experimental equipment, the people and everything else. So in other words, I don't know the answer. It would be highly factually specific, and it would really depend on a number of legal and factual circumstances that I can't, you can hypothesize all the time. I will say that Alcor has, I think you may know in the past, when a few of the for-profits kind of went under, I think, and I don't know the exact specifications on this, but I do believe Alcor's been asked to take over several patients, for instance, in the past, and I'm not even sure they got paid for it. They probably took a loss on it. But I do know that we have some people in the doer that were the result of that. I think there's 1 or 2 very prominent former kind of leaders in Cryonics in the past or something that fell in that category. But so I don't know the answer, Dan, or Max, excuse me. It would depend on the circumstances.
But you're open to it. I like this.
We want to do what's right, man. We want to advance the science as quickly as possible. We want to preserve life to the extent we can, in the sense of whatever components of that exist, whether it's DNA, a whole brain, or a whole body. But we have to do it in service to our members who are funding it, as a science and research experiment. So there's a lot to think of. This is a hard job. I don't think anybody understands how difficult this is. And I think if you talk to Emil, I think if you talk to Dennis, you talk to anybody who's in a position of trying to lead this stuff, whoa, wow, oh my goodness. And by the way, I've been in some different emerging technology environments and companies. This is unique stuff because you have this cultural backlash. You have a headwind that you're trying to push against while you're trying to do the right thing, and for the right reasons. But even for that reason, people's perception is often negative. You might be underfunded, or even if you're for profit, you have investors. Like, think about that on the investor model. Investors will put money in, and you can do a very nice presentation with that money. But at some point, that money comes due. That money comes due. And how do you pay it? I don't know. I'm not in that world. I'm in the nonprofit world. So I don't know.
Every now and then you'll see people kind of pop into the space and presume that it's, that, oh, you're trying to solve death and people don't want to die, so this product must sell itself, and they kind of talk all types of bullshit about how, how if just you did this and that, it would just all come together. And like, once you've kind of heard enough of this, you know that it's just like a couple of weeks of them really jumping into it, and they're gonna get like a rude awakening.
I don't think it's a good business model to jump into. If you ask me on a for-profit side, and I'm just talking in the U.S. I don't know, outside the U.S., but I think that if you were to do this and operate this kind of thing as a pure for-profit model today, oh, good luck, man. I mean, we're doing it for all the altruistic reasons in science and benefit of humanity, and we still get pushback every day from all kinds of angles, man. So good luck starting a company in that environment. That is a tough thing to do. I don't know.
And while we're still in the realm of legal matters, so your background in law, and very specifically your time with Alcor, gives you a pretty unique perspective on this industry that probably not a lot of other people have. Could you give us a sense of what the major legal challenges are? What's keeping you up at night in this regard?
So the question is, what keeps me up at night with regards to legal circumstances related to cryopreservation and the service and research component of that? I can honestly say that I don't get kept up at night by that. Meaning the legal issues, it's not that I'm not aware of them. Obviously, I'm intimately aware of them. It's more that, let me put it a different way. So I've advised a lot of doctors. I mean, that's something I have a medical textbook chapter I've written. I mean, this is demonstrable that I've been one of the guys that really has focused on healthcare in the law in terms of the practitioner side. And there have been studies that have shown that if a doctor has good relations with their patients, meaning what they call bedside manner, that even when they make mistakes, they are some orders of magnitude less likely to get in legal trouble as a result of that. It's much less likely they get sued. So, what that tells to me, both in all of my different businesses and environments, is treat people well, break bread with people. I mean, I've met members face to face now. They know who I am. They know that I am sincere in my attempt to do this right and my intentions towards them. And as members, I think you guys, hopefully that comes across to you. I've met you in person. I will do my damnedest to make sure we can do the best we can under the circumstances. And when you give that off, I just don't feel that anxiety about, oh, I'm going to get sued because whatever. I mean, look, it can happen in the U.S. We know Alcor's had to deal with that throughout its history. The things that do give me pause are, frankly, it has to do with individual rights. So I don't talk about my politics at all, and I think I have kind of my own mix, but I am very big on individual rights. I think that people ought to have the right of self-determination. And I found this out when I went to Canada. I didn't know this in Canada, but that when you die, your body belongs to the regent, belongs to the king or queen. I mean, that's wild, right? And so a lot of their legal system is structured for the notion that when you die, you become property of the monarchy, and then it goes through this chain. It ultimately ends up being similar to what we do, but in the U.S. it's different. The U.S. remains tend to fall under private property of your estate or your next in line kind of thing. So how I perceive this in the legal world is my concerns are the people that want to come into a situation and tell you what you can or cannot do with your own body in terms of self-determination at the time of death. That kind of thing bothers me. It keeps me up at night. I would fight aggressively against that, and I think that you ought to have the right, and I go back to Hunter S. Thompson, if you know that story, that I think it was Johnny Depp that paid $3 million or something to shoot his ashes out of a cannon. Cool. That's the ultimate right of self-determination. That's kind of the American spirit, as they say. And I think it should apply across the world. But nonetheless, what keeps me up at night is somebody, whether, and sometimes you see it with family, for instance, that they want the money. That bothers me because I've done some trust and estate work too. My partner-in-law did a lot of that, and you would see these people. I had a circumstance once. I'll tell it generally. I'll change the circumstances a little bit, but we had a group of people, 4 of them, that were fighting over, say, 100 grand. Okay, well, it's easy. They were all entitled to 25 grand. But they were just like physically getting aggressive across a conference table over this. And I finally stopped everything by yelling. I yelled, stop, stop. I said, do you guys get it? I go, you keep this up, you're not getting anything. You're literally not getting a dime. The lawyers are getting all of it. All of it. So you can either walk out of here with your 25 grand, or if you keep this up, you get nothing. Good luck. And I left. I was pissed. I walked out. And, we settled that case that day, shockingly for about 25 grand a person. So that whole right of self-determination at the time of death, and the notion that people would want to take the money that you've worked hard for in life, and life insurance, a contract or whatever, and interfere with that at your most vulnerable state, because you really are, that's your most vulnerable state. You're not conscious, right? You have no consciousness. Can't do anything. That just bothers me. It's just a fundamental, as a lawyer and what I'm trained to do. If people want to interfere with that, whether it's politicians or individuals, man, that rubs me the wrong way. So, as you might know, Alcor has a litigation history historically, well before I was there. Unfortunately, what the news doesn't do a good job of telling you is that Alcor, they've done some good stuff in terms of setting precedents. There's case law out there. There's cases, the Larry Johnson case, there's still a judgment on that guy. They never tell you about that. They never tell you about the defamation judgment. That's something you ought to know.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of the lawyers ending up getting all the money, one of the gripes I just constantly hear, sometimes from Alcor members, oftentimes from kind of the more tribalistic CI members, is that Alcor has spent a pretty good deal of money on legal expenses in the past, like you mentioned. So I guess knowing this more intimately than anybody, for one, how true is that? And 2, can anything be done about that going forward to kind of reduce this spending?
So the question is there are people who are upset or critique kind of Alcor's legal spending in the past. And we just talked about Alcor does have a history of litigation going way back. Let me, again, I kind of go to my personal experience in my career and what have you. So I'll give you an example. There was a company that I worked for, and it's a company y'all know, but they were the first to introduce a technology in the United States. This was decades ago, so before I was an attorney practicing for them. But the story as it was put to me was when they came out with this technology, it was popular and it was widely used, but it was kind of a risky technology in the sense of, people could get hurt using it. And this company got sued, and they got sued a lot. But the product was sound. It was a good product. It was designed and engineered well. But the company made a policy that they were not going to settle cases because they were the first to introduce the technology. They knew they were going to take the hit because anytime you introduce, electric vehicles, you're seeing it with Tesla right now, right? They're getting hit right and left. But what they're doing is so much better for the greater good, right? In terms of electric vehicles and introduction into the culture and the lives that might be saved from the environmental impact and everything else. But these companies go into it knowing that being the first to post, you're sticking your neck out, you're exposed, you're going to get hit. And I think Alcor, and I don't know because I don't know their attorneys in the past and everything else, but I think Alcor as an entity has understood that it needed to set boundaries in the law, and it needed to put a flagpost in the ground and challenge some things and create what we call precedents, because in the U.S. precedents is really important. That's different than in Europe. You don't have this problem in Europe, by the way. They have what's called a civil law structure. It's different. So in the U.S., you almost don't have a choice, but if you're an emerging technology and a leader in the forefront of it, and it's anything that people can sue you on, you almost don't have a choice. You have to decide, are we going to settle these? And once you do, you become a target. Like there's literally these plaintiffs boards, and I don't think people know how this works, but there are literally these boards, online or what have you, that plaintiffs counsel all get onto, and they all talk about what the next target is. And you'll know what the next target is as a civilian based on the commercials. So if you see a commercial that, have you used this product and such happened, half of those cases may never go anywhere. But they're testing to draw out what are called lead plaintiffs from the public. And so there's a whole thing that goes on that people don't know about. Now, I think in Alcor's case, me having some of that background, I think in the leadership position, it doesn't make us immune from attack or anything. It just means that I'm maybe conscious of it and aware of some things. Are people going to sue and get sued? Yeah, man. And I tell my business clients, some of them, that you've made it in business when you get sued, because people don't sue unsuccessful things. They sue things that are challenging the norm, that stick your head out for it. But is it a critique of Alcor, the spend? Look, you know as well as I do, any sophisticated person listening to this, any person who's run a business, any person who's been in an executive role at a company anywhere, you absolutely know that there are things you can't discuss. And if you trust your leadership and you trust what you're part of, then trust that they're trying to do their best. And nobody likes legal spend. Do you think I like legal spend? I don't like legal spend. I hate it sometimes. I even hate when clients have to, when I was in that role as an outside attorney, there were cases I had that were patently unfair. Just patently unfair, that our system should never have allowed. And I hated the fact that I had to write an invoice, but I had to. It's part of the gig. So my answer to you is, I think people don't know what they don't know.
Well, I think I'm kind of glad you explained it in that way. I think that's the first kind of elaborate explanation for this common gripe I hear, and I'm gonna kind of point people towards this part of the podcast in the future, because I don't think that's been explained very well, and I think I hear it enough that I think it's a relatively common misconception. So I'm glad we're able to cover that.
Yeah. Having a good attorney or a good legal team and a good head on one's shoulders to deal with that is incredibly important when you're trying to do anything valuable in life. And yeah, people who don't understand the importance of spending good money on good legal services they just haven't been in this situation quite yet to know how important it is. This is a bit of a side question from what we've been talking about, but I know it's one that's also been on the mind of a lot of people that we're connected to. Has there been any updates on Alcor's work or research efforts into organ cryopreservation?
Okay, are there any updates that are public? I should qualify that question with that statement. I will say that when I've started working with Alcor, I have made myself aware of strengths and weaknesses, of initiatives and things that we ought to pursue. Like I mentioned earlier about eating an elephant, you've got to do it one bite at a time. I don't think you step into the world of brain preservation and say, we're going to preserve a brain tomorrow and magically it happens. I think you have to start with smaller systems. And Alcor happens to be the best in the world, I think, at recovering and preserving bodies and brains. And part of that includes a whole bunch of other stuff. So the answer to your question is am I aware of the significance of the potential for organ banking and perhaps even Alcor's technology playing a role in that? Absolutely, I'm aware of it. Would I be remiss not to examine that further? Yeah, I'd be remiss. Meaning, by remiss, I mean it's something that ought to be explored, and it is something that, if you know me, you know that if I'm talking about it, it's probably already been done. So Where that goes, nobody knows. But you can bet your ass that I'm aware of it. And if I'm aware of it, I've probably looked into it.
Some breakthroughs in that space would change the game, as we both know, right? So
10% success, 10% success at what we do is a kidney. That's 10%. 50% is a heart and multi-system organ preservation, and 100% is brain revival. And so I view this model in terms of cryopreservation as being a 10%, 50%, and 100%. 10%, I don't see why that's not achievable, perhaps in our lifespans, depending on your individual lifespan. But there's a lot of people working on it. A lot of people see it. I happen to think that Alcor has a little bit of, tricks up its sleeve in the sense that it's been around 50 plus years and it was looking at it before it was cool. And so there's data that Alcor has that nobody can replicate. It's not possible to replicate 50 years of data unless you started today and went ahead 50 years. We have it. So, yeah, I've got to be cautious what I say about that. But everything I'm doing is in service to the members, and if it can result in a better cryopreservation, advancing the technology, or generating revenue that services our members and the ultimate goals of the research on behalf of our members, you can bet your ass I'm looking into it.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit right now, kind of as we wind down. We're going to get into the more.
My wife's getting mad. I think I'm in trouble.
The more fun part of the podcast. We do a section called Questions from the Community, which is we gather questions from social media and online in the Discord server, and we give them a chance to ask you kind of more direct things that they wouldn't get a chance to otherwise. So we're just gonna kind of spitfire ask you these and give it.
I reserve the right not to answer. I could go any which direction, but I'm a pretty blunt guy, so shoot, let's have fun.
Okay, so Eric Magro, he's an Alcor member and a donor, has a couple of questions for you. First is, how is the ICE program going, and has the referral system had much success?
Eric, thanks for asking about ICE and the ICE program. We have shown some early, I will call it limited success. I think that there are resources that perhaps could be put in to kind of amplify that success. But in the short term, my attention kind of has to be on some of these core services, and that's what I'm focused on. But certainly I know Marji and Diane see the potential of ICE, and we do want to explore that further. I appreciate your patience in the meantime. We do have a lot that we're trying to do quickly that go to core services. But yes, the ICE has shown some potential for success. Whether or not that will extrapolate to high levels of growth, I don't know yet. There are other things that are not public yet that may substantially contribute both to ICE and to growth. And when they come out and become public, I think membership will be surprised and hopefully happy at the results. And that may also help some of the ICE people in terms of their ambassadorship to the public. I think there's a cultural renaissance that we're working on, and that could contribute to ICE, the success of ICE as well. So stay tuned. Let me leave it on that. Stay tuned.
Eric's second question is, what are Alcor's social media and outreach strategies?
So Eric, as it relates to Alcor's social media and outreach strategies, that's a great question. In fact, that's a fundamental question when I accepted the position, because part of my position is what's called PR, public relations, and that kind of public education. Because Alcor hasn't thought of itself as an organization that needed to market, for instance, because we're a nonprofit, all their resources have gone into making the science really good and making the service really good. The problem with that is we haven't told the message very well. So Alcor needs to do better, absolutely, when it comes to social media outreach. We are working on it. I don't know if you saw, there's Jack Gordon. He's a well-known YouTuber for the young people. He just did a YouTube piece that was, kind of geared towards younger people, 20 to 25 range. But again, some of those non-public initiatives relate to that, and I'm working on it. But we have some room to grow there, and we're not there yet. But it is a known issue. Working on it.
We have another question. I know it's about marketing. I know we touched on it kind of briefly, and I know the word marketing and nonprofit, there's some kind of weird interactions there. But Rocking Golem from the Cryosphere Discord server asks, what are the plans and intentions for additional marketing? It doesn't feel like Alcor has done much on this front in the past.
So Rockham, I think is the name, hopefully, if I get that right. But Rockham, what are the plans for additional marketing, as it were, for Alcor? First of all, let me orient that towards what are the plans for additional public relations and education. All right, because we're a nonprofit, so we don't market. But I am still examining exactly what the best application and use of dollars are as it relates to marketing. What gets good results. Things like your kind of more traditional quote unquote advertising, say for instance like a magazine ad or something, or nowadays an online ad. Those don't actually translate. Numerically, they don't translate well at all to, for instance, new membership signups. They don't. There's demonstrably true. So what I've been looking at is more of the long form educational opportunities, which have to do with, say, for instance, the documentary space, normalizing cryonics generally, which is coming through the broader media or the mass media, and understand that Alcor, to your benefit as a member, if you're a member, has really focused most of its spending on the research and on the service component related to that research. That's great news for you as a member. That's bad news for you as somebody who wants marketing. Alcor does not traditionally spend much on marketing, and so what I'm trying to do in my role is find avenues for public education that don't cost much. And the good news is we are having some success with that, and that success will become hopefully very public and apparent probably in about 6 months. But I can't say much more about it.
Awesome. So Lost Botanist, who is also from the Discord server, asks, how important is transparency to Alcor? Do you find value in publishing detailed case reports of every preservation? Can members expect regular detailed updates on the state of Alcor's finances and research as well?
So, what was the name there, Dan?
Lost Botanist.
Okay, Lost Botanist, thanks for your question. The question relates to transparency, particularly at Alcor, both as it relates to kind of case reports and also finances. Let me address finances first, because that's a pretty easy one in the sense that Alcor, and unlike, say, for-profit organizations, Alcor is a 501c3 nonprofit. There are a number of hoops we have to jump through, including the public publication, as it were, of most of our finances. I think even my salary is public somewhere if you really want to dig, and I think we even posted probably on our website. There's these forms that have a name that relate to the tax and nonprofit structure. But so the good news is financially we are, I think, as translucent or transparent as anybody could be in this space. With regards to case reports and those sorts of things, we're kind of at this weird crossroads, because traditionally Alcor has tried to publish most of its case reports or cases and things like that. But as we get higher volume, and we still have a small staff, and case reports have to be done in a very technical way. They require enormous amounts of time. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of come up with a system that will maybe highlight perhaps like unusual cases, or new kind of procedures that were tested or tried, or what have you, because after a while some of these cases, if they're kind of the more quote unquote normal cases, they don't necessarily add much to the scientific or public discourse. We're not, I've heard Alcor get knocked because, for instance, we have private board meetings in conjunction with public board meetings. So there's this whole like secrecy, transparency issue. I don't know many organizations where the CEO gives out his email. Like, you can call me. You know what I mean? And look, we're running a business in a way, so I can't talk to you about HR issues. That's just 101, man. And if you have any sophistication, you know that in terms of running a business and stuff. I can't talk to you about people's personal medical conditions. And I've been attacked for like not talking about a patient's like medical conditions or something. It's like, we're not allowed to talk about some of this stuff, man. So give us a little bit of latitude. But in terms of transparency, one of two things is going to happen. I'm either going to answer your question, or I'm going to give you some context as to why I can't or shouldn't answer your question. And I think, what else can you ask for in terms of transparency? So that is what's on offer to people. If they don't like it, look, I'm not going to please everybody, and Cryonics is not for everybody. Don't do it if you don't want to be part of the process. I'm kind of blunt about that. Like, again, we're not marketing. I'm not trying to pitch you. I'm not trying to sell you on something. You choose to be a part of the grandest experiment in the course of human history of biology. That's your choice. And if that's your choice, I'm going to do my damnedest to do a great job at it. But, I'm not going to get into confidential information, personal confidential information that I shouldn't. Like, I just won't. So if you knock me on that, that's a you issue. I will try and be as transparent as legally I'm permitted to be, So, and you have accessibility. So transparency and accessibility go hand in hand. I mean, we're having a conference where you can attend it. Do it if you care that much. I challenge you.
Okay. Now we have a member who prefers to stay anonymous, and they ask...
I love those. I don't get to be anonymous. My whole career's on the line here.
They're asking, are there any initiatives that were in place when you took the leadership position that you don't feel are currently worth continuing?
Are there any initiatives at Alcor when I took the leadership position that I don't feel are worth continuing? There's one that's kind of a hot button item, and that has to do with the publication of a magazine. So there's a lot, and Alcor's got this disparate kind of age gap in membership. So we have people in their 20s, we have people in their 80s. And oftentimes kind of the older generation, they still want literally a hard copy magazine. Okay? Now, obviously, hard copy magazines they're expensive. And when I stepped into Alcor, like I said, I kind of analyzed the cost spending analysis and do a lot of that stuff really quickly. And, we had, I don't know, like our readership on hard copy magazines was, some ridiculous number in terms of the cost relative to readership. I mean, I don't want to quote it. I'm just throwing numbers out. I don't know. But let's say there were 10 people and it cost, I don't even know. This is just a number. But let's say it cost $10,000 and there are 10 people who read it. Well, that's $1,000 magazine. Okay? That's not a wise use of resources. Like, we can do a digital magazine. Most people can access a computer these days. And also, by the way, our staff bandwidth. We have a small nonprofit staff. If my staff are spending 50 hours a month publishing a magazine that has a readership of 50, that's not a wise use of our staff time, right? So that is kind of an initiative that I am changing. We don't know, and this has been kind of messed around with for a while, I think, at Alcor, and people gripe about that. But there isn't a perfect formula yet. I'm working on it, but yes, that is something that was there that I inherited that is popular with a group of people, and it's, but it's not a good use of nonprofit resources to do it in that form. So I have to mix that up. And what I'm leaning towards is maybe a biannual publication, like kind of the highlights or best of, or maybe like an annual scientific review with a maybe quarterly kind of more social, kind of more of a PR kind of digital kind of edition. I know that we have like a newsletter to members, which I do like, and I want to make that more robust. But again, do you want me focused on that right now, or do you want me focused on giving you the absolute world-class, highest quality recovery teams? I'm going to guess you'll lean towards the first, and then we can get to the latter. That's my guess.
And I might also suggest here, James, that in a world with a Cryonics podcast and a Cryonics Discord server and et cetera, maybe we don't need the magazine, right? In such a world where we now have all these other avenues of people being able to interact and exchange information and everything in this small community.
Yeah, and what tends to happen is oftentimes the smallest subset of people can be the most vocal. And so, you hear people shouting from the mountaintops about some issue that's really important to them. And I'm not here to minimize that. I get it. But understand that I'm wearing a hat that has a responsibility for one of the most diverse groups of people, economically, in terms of their thinking, their politics, and everything else. We have 1,500 plus members. I have to do what's best in terms of the spend and nobody's ever going to agree with me 100%. Like I have to choose my battles. I have to, I come from a world where we have to present in court, and we get judged. There's a literal person with the title judge that judges us. And so I kind of look at a lot of decision making in the form of, hey, can I have a rational justification for this? And even if I was wrong about a decision, did it make sense at the time and seem to be, based on the facts I knew, kind of the best, what we call balance of equities. If you had a scale, that's where that law thing with the scale comes in. Is it 51-49%? Because my obligation is to the membership of a nonprofit. So I have to analyze those things. I won't make you all happy. I promise you, I will not make you all happy. It's just part of the job.
Making everyone happy, that's an impossible goal, and especially in a community like this.
Yeah.
So we like to close up with a quick little segment we call overrated, underrated, and
All right, that'll be interesting.
Oh yeah, it's quick in this. So it's just, do you think that this idea or this thing is overrated or underrated by by people in this community or people who might be listening?
Okay.
And then we'll wrap up with this. So a few of these. Number one, overrated or underrated hormone replacement therapy.
Well, hell, I run a clinic that does hormone replacement therapy. My wife is one of the best in the country at it. So I'm going to say that is way underrated. A lot of what happens in our bodies is chemical, and guess what? Those chemicals are hormones. So I know personally, I'm not advertising here, but I will say that our chemical makeup makes a tremendous difference in our physical health on a daily basis. I see it, in my other business, and so I will say that I think that the widespread medical community needs to take it much more seriously than they do. And we see demonstrably life-changing impact from hormone replacement therapies that are well applied. They have to be well done though, because if you're getting them from a place from another country and you don't know what's in the mixture, that's a problem. Get them done, get it done where you know exactly what's going into it. I call it bioidentical. You want to get bioidentical where possible. Super important. But as you age, your body makes less and less of stuff. And if you maintain it consistently throughout, you're actually, I think, far better off in terms of the healing process, the rest process. Sorry, I'm going on, but way underrated.
So something many of the members might want to look into, making sure they're on the right balance of all these different chemicals that they need to be balanced with, just so that they don't need your services too soon. Not too soon.
I know, 100%. In respect to my wife, which I'll do a shout out to her. I have never seen a practitioner. I worked with a ton of practitioners over my career, 20 plus years. She literally takes like these charts of labs on people's chemicals, like you say, and is like balancing them on the nightly. So after the patient visit and everything else, going back on lab reports and going through them line by line, and then like somehow magically like trying to get them to the optimal level or whatever. And she spends, frankly, as a business, she spends way too much time. But God bless her. If you read her reviews, she gets tons of credit for that because she's really made a difference for people. So very proud of the work she's done in that space. But yeah, it's important.
Cool. So litigating in a courtroom in front of a judge.
Underrated or overrated?
Like, is it an experience that just turns people on? It's exciting, or is it like draining and unpleasant?
Well, that's a hard question to answer because, litigators make up less than 10% of the legal profession. So 9 out of 10 lawyers don't go in the courtroom. They're sitting in a room doing contracts or something like that. And then, of course, the 10%, of which I'm one of them, we kind of have this weird ego issue, right? I mean, that's part of the job. You have to have this irrational confidence that you can go in there because you're literally getting shouted at. And I think most people would find it to be very unnerving and uncomfortable. And I have at times. I mean, you get an aggressive judge and you're not, don't know all the facts. And I definitely have some stories, some war stories of, for instance, a client not telling you something. And then the judge telling you in court, and you're like, oh, you try not to ever let that happen. But gosh, I think for most people, I don't know if overrated, underrated would apply, but I would say for most people, like greater than 90% of people, they don't want that. They don't want that heat. And for the people that do kind of like, we kind of have this adrenaline rush, even the best lawyer is going to tell you there are times where it's really unpleasant. And frankly, in this profession, I think the self-care issue and self-medicating issue, those are real issues, because the stress level that we encounter, I call it intellectual. It's like intellectual battle. So like I used to do some athletics and like, some training with some like boxing and wrestling and things like that. And when you step in a ring, or you step in a wrestling ring, you have this adrenaline dump, right? The court is similar to that, but it's in your brain. And so there's somebody who's actively fighting against you, like plotting against you intellectually. And when you step in that ring, they're ready to intellectually attack you. So imagine that every other day. That's your job. So that's tough. That's tough. Not an easy job.
I sat in on the back when Apple and Google were fighting out the phone stuff, all the patents around the smartphones, and whether you could patent like pulling the phone in a certain direction. All these court battles were taking place in San Jose, and I went and sat in on a bunch of these, and
Wow.
it was an experience. I mean, seeing massive legal team paid infinite money on one side, and massive legal team paid infinite money on the other side, and just the head to head. Yeah, it's like you said, it's an adrenaline rush. I'm sure they were all amped up the whole time, and it was like kind of an extreme sports thing too. Just constant pressure. Takes a special kind of person.
There's somebody plotting to attack you intellectually.
Yeah.
Think about that. Like if you're in litigation, I'll digress a little bit, but like let's say I had to be in court tomorrow. That means that right now, tonight, somewhere in the world, there would be a group of people that were plotting to make me look bad in front of an audience tomorrow. That's the gig. That is tough.
I don't see how you get any sleep the night before. I wouldn't be sleeping the night before.
It's not easy, man. It's a tough gig.
Yeah. Well, okay, last one.
Sure.
Coin collecting. Overrated,
Oh
overrated.
gosh, come on. Oh,
Maybe a soft one at the end here.
well, look. I mean, these guys know that I'm big into coins. If you're trying to get a date, it's very overrated. If you want,
I don't want to mention that one.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, if you're trying to get a date, it's you probably don't want to talk about your coin collection. But if you're looking for a hobby, a guy like me, I used to be pretty athletic. I've got some health things going on, and I need something that, frankly, like you talked about with litigation and with a job like this, there's so many broad, long-term issues that the reason I, for instance, like coin collecting and think it's underrated is because it gives me something to focus my attention on that's tangible. So much of the legal or philosophical things that we deal with, they're broad issues. You can't hold or grasp them. But with a coin, and the other thing about coins is they're a piece of history. So if you get a coin that's 150 years old, that was buying somebody the means of transportation to make their livelihood, and somehow that traveled from the past into the future. Now think about that as it applies to cryonics. A lot of cryonicists like coin collecting. Why? Because your brain is something that will exist in the past that you hope will have a consciousness or an existence in the future. These coins apply in the same way. They had a tangible existence 150 years ago, and yet today they have value and they're tangible today, and they tell a story. That's what I love about that.
Let's see if we can get more people into it at this point. We'll see.
That's a tough ask, man. These
It's a tough ask.
Kids these days. You're old when you say kids these days, but yeah.
Well, like you said, you don't want to just can't put it in the dating profile. Keep it
No,
out of that.
don't do that.
No, that's a way to remain single forever. So, any last words? Anything you want folks to know about? I mean, they should definitely come. Alcor members should definitely come to Colorado during that. Anything else you want to leave folks with some parting words?
I do. When it comes to folks that are involved with cryonics or want to be involved with cryonics, whether it's Alcor or another organization, although I think we're the best, look, you are somebody that I call a possibility thinker. You're somebody who's trying to break through the barriers culturally, scientifically. I think that you deserve recognition for, putting effort and thought and energy into wanting to contribute to the advancement of human evolution, which is what we're trying to do. If you can take a brain that's been around for 60 years and double the length of that contribution in a meaningful way through its consciousness and knowledge, and you see that, you're a visionary. And that's what the word Alcor means. The word Alcor was actually used to recognize a star that was next to the North Star, and it was much dimmer. And it was used to test sailors to see their vision and whether or not they could see Alcor, this little star. And that's why that was adopted by Fred Chamberlain, a NASA scientist, hard scientist. And he said, look, if you can see what we're trying to do here, you're a visionary. You're a possibility thinker. And I want those people on my boat. Those are the people I want to sail into the future with.
Oh, I suspect many of those are listening to this podcast episode and are very happy that you are taking Alcor in some great directions.
Ryan, man, you know it. Let's do it. Let's all do it, man. Our collective wisdom and resources and efforts, including the people like you, Dan, and Max, we can do this. We can do this. It's doable. It's achievable. That 10% is achievable. Let's change the world. Let's change medicine. Let's do it. We can do it. I'm on it.
James, thank you very much for coming on the Cryonics Underground podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night. See ya.
All right. James has left our virtual studio. Wow. That man has a lot of energy. That man has...
Yes, he does.
He is what we describe, we call in the startup world a hustler. I would say I hope he takes that the right way when he listens to this, but he feels like a bit of an unstoppable force, which I think is, we've had the pleasure, of course, of speaking to each of the CEOs that Alcor's had in the past few years, and what James brings to it is this energy for execution that, he's going to go out there, he's going to shake lots of hands, he's going to, make the deals, he's going to make it happen. And I look forward to what that approach will bring to, everybody who's been in leadership position of Alcor has brought a different approach, and each of those have their strengths. But I'm curious to see what James is going to be able to do in his tenure there, because he does have a lot of interesting ideas, and he definitely has the drive to execute on them. So yeah, I think it'll be great. I look forward to it, and I really appreciated that he came out to Austin and met with us as one of the first things that he did when he took the position. That shows a lot. So yeah, I think we're going to be in good hands. I too, like a lot of people, I think we're when we have another CEO, it's another person taking over, and what's going on, and I was like, oh, there's too much. Who is this guy? What's going on? I don't know anything, but I was pleasantly surprised and impressed. So I think we're going to see good things coming from Alcor and coming from James in the near future, and hopefully for a good time to come. Daniel, what was your impression?
Yeah, I felt the same way. I feel like a lot of Alcor members have been for a long time now craving movement, kind of movement in any direction. I think you're going to see that with James. He is certainly going to move things, and it's exciting. And I'm kind of really sitting with bated breath to see how some of these initiatives play out. And I think for Cryonics, which is such a kind of slow going thing, I don't know. He's bringing some energy to it, and I appreciate that. And what I think was really great about this discussion in specific is that I feel the podcast listeners are going to get a pretty raw version of what James was really like in person. when Max and I, had the pleasure to sit down with him one-on-one over dinner. James was the same
one on two over dinner,
yeah,
but yeah, it was pretty close. Yeah,
he was essentially the same blunt, straight shooting guy that you all got to witness today. And I think between listening to this episode and maybe coming out to the Alcor strategic meeting, if you're a member, I think that the more motivated Alcor members who've otherwise felt kind of left out of the loop for a long time, but would finally kind of get a good grasp of what's going on in the organization and kind of really get a sense for the people behind it all. And in any case, I hope those who do make the trek to Colorado in the next few weeks will actually, Max and I will be there. So if you are there and you're a fan of the podcast, don't hesitate to stop and say hi. We'd be happy to meet you, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, should be a good time. And like you said, I hear the Rocky Mountains, are probably at least cooler than anything down here in Texas. Certainly out there, and cooler than anything in Arizona. All right, so that was James Arrowood with the Cryonics Underground podcast, and again, we'll see you all on the 25th and 26th for the meeting, whoever can make it, out in Estes Park, Colorado. The link is down in the description. We will see you all on the next one, or in Colorado. Okay, bye.